Have you ever wished you could wake up stronger, calmer, and more in control of your life without having to do anything? What if I told you that while you sleep, your mind could be training itself to become wiser, more resilient, and completely unshakable? You see, most people don't realize that the thoughts they go to bed with shape their entire life. If you fall asleep with stress, anxiety, or regret, your brain absorbs it like a sponge. But if you fill your mind with wisdom before bed, if you allow the greatest minds in history to whisper powerful Stoic lessons into your subconscious, you don't just sleep, you transform. It's strange, isn't it? We spend hours trying to fix things during the day, but we forget the most powerful hours happen at night, when your conscious mind lets go and your subconscious takes over. The Stoics understood this long before science confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius didn't become one of the most disciplined minds in history by chance. His strength came from intentional thought, quiet reflection, and the discipline to guide his mind before it drifted. They knew if you don't program your mind, the world will do it for you, and it rarely programs you for peace. This is your chance to take back control, to stop waking up with the same emotional weight you carried into bed. Because if your last thoughts at night are filled with clarity, strength, and timeless wisdom, then your mornings will meet you with a mind that's already trained to lead, not react. A mind that doesn't get pulled by chaos, but moves with purpose. And if what we're doing here speaks to you, if it helps even just a little, there's a small but powerful way you can help keep this going. Just hit the subscribe button. No pressure. It's free, takes 1 second, and it's the kind of support that really matters. Let's talk more about the part that no one talks about. What goes through your mind when everything is still, and how that stillness could be the key to changing your whole life. Your mind is always awake, even when your eyes are closed and your body is still. This is something that most people miss. They think that sleep is just a break from the day's events, a time when everything stops. But the truth is that the mind never really stops working. It gets slower. It stops. It makes its loudness softer. Under the surface, though, it keeps going. It does hear. It does things. It takes in. And what it takes in the last few minutes before going to sleep. What you think, feel, and believe at night can affect how you think and feel the next day. There is no lyrical exaggeration here. This is how the mind works. The mind is awake all the time. At night, when you're not thinking about anything, your subconscious mind keeps track of, organizes, and reinforces the patterns you've been feeding it lately. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what this truth is all about. In the event that you don't change your inner world, it will be changed for you by fear, old memories, or any unsolved chaos. Most people take the stress of the day with them to bed, unknowingly giving it to their subconscious to be woven deeper into their minds. It's because they thought about how nervous or unmotivated they felt while they slept that they don't realize it when they wake up. But here's what makes that fact powerful. The mind can be trained if it doesn't sleep. You can change the way you think even when you're not awake. You just have to be careful about what you let into your mind before it's ready to take it in. This is the place where the chance is. You shouldn't try to make changes during the day. Instead, you should get ready for them when it's quiet and your mind is free. When you're in this window between being awake and asleep, your thoughts have the most effect. According to Aristotle, we are what we do over and over again. If you take that idea beyond action and into thought, You'll see that we become what we think about over and over again. Brain paths are made through repetition. It's true that the more you think about something, the stronger it gets. If you think about fears all the time before bed, those worries will become your normal. However, if you feed your mind strength, perspective, and timeless knowledge, those are the thoughts that will shape how you see the world. Your brain doesn't know the difference between good and bad things for you. It only makes stronger what it gets most of the time. There were no words for what the Stoics knew, but they knew it. They thought that thinking about things every night would clean the mind, not punish people. In his meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself to remember himself, to keep his thoughts in check. What you think about shows what kind of thought you have. The color of your soul changes based on what you think. Philosophizing, just to sound smart, wasn't what this was. It was a plan, a daily exercise of the mind that would keep it in line with morality, even when it was at rest. It's important how you talk to yourself before bed. The mind does listen, even though it's easy to ignore the talk inside. A small negative thought about yourself said before bed can keep going back and forth for hours, leaving a deeper mark. The same is true for your fears, your anger, and the problems you keep putting off until the dark. When you bring them into bed, your mind pays attention to them. It starts to fix issues that don't need to be fixed. It makes you afraid of things that might not happen, and slowly, quietly, it changes the way you see your life. But here's something most people don't know. That process can be stopped. Even when the mind is quiet, you can still lead it. It's important to pick what you say. Not saying forced statements or acting like everything is okay is not what this is about. That's what it means to pick thoughts that are true, deep, and strong. Getting thoughts that remind you of things you know deep down is what it's all about. That fear is not true is like the fact that you don't have to act on every feeling, that peace isn't found in not having problems, but in how you deal with them. As Plato said, beating yourself is the first and greatest victory. That fight doesn't just happen during the day. It keeps going when it's dark, quiet, and just you and your thoughts. That's when the real training starts. That time will grab you if you don't take it. You wake up every day behind schedule and with old ideas that you didn't even think the night before. You're not tired because you didn't take a break. Your mind practiced chaos while your body tried to heal, which is why you're tired. When you choose what your mind reads before bed, it changes the base you stand on when you wake up. It doesn't have to be hard either. A strong recitation of a single wise phrase can be more powerful than hours of deep thought. The mind responds to what is repeated, not what is true, not what is best, just what is repeated. That's why even negative beliefs can feel real. Not because they're accurate, but because they've been rehearsed for so long. This is why training the mind must be done when it's most receptive. Right before sleep, your conscious resistance is down. The filter that normally separates surface thoughts from deep beliefs is more relaxed. What you repeat slips more easily into the subconscious. If that repetition is grounded in clarity and reason, it strengthens your mental core. But if it's based in fear or regret, it leaves you more vulnerable to spiraling cycles that feel impossible to escape. There's no need to wait until morning to reset. Reset starts before you close your eyes. The body will rest regardless. But the mind that has to be guided, that has to be given direction. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." That includes the hours we pretend not to live, our time in sleep. If you never examine what you take into that silence, You'll be ruled by patterns you don't even recognize. So reprogramming isn't about force. It's about attention. It's about asking, what do I want to reinforce? What do I want my mind to carry into tomorrow? The brain can't distinguish between thoughts that are intentional and thoughts that are impulsive. It just responds. That's why the 5 minutes before sleep matter more than the 5 hours that follow. That's when the script is handed to the subconscious. That's when you decide what version of yourself wakes up. You don't need perfection to start. You don't need to be fearless or wise. You just need to feed the mind a better pattern. Start small. One sentence, one idea, one truth that you want to live by. Repeat it. Let it sink in. Let it replace the noise. Your mind is listening even when you aren't. And the more you guide it with wisdom, the more it begins to think in alignment with who you truly are. Not who you were yesterday, but who you've chosen to become. And that choice, though it feels quiet, is one of the loudest things you'll ever do. It shapes your reactions. It shifts your confidence. It becomes the way you carry yourself through the world, because every person you admire, the calm ones, the disciplined ones, the grounded ones, they weren't born that way. They trained for it, not just in front of others, not just when life demanded it, but when it was dark and quiet and no one was watching. That's when real change happens. When no one's looking, when the world is silent, when the mind is yours, and yours alone to shape. And that's where your power lives, in what you choose to think when the day is done. The thoughts you fall asleep with are not just echoes of the day. They are blueprints for who you become. Every night, without realizing it, you carry the weight of certain feelings, ideas, and beliefs into your sleep. These things don't just fade into the darkness. They settle into you. They settle into your nervous system, your habits, your sense of self. You may think sleep is a break, a time out from everything going on, but your mind doesn't treat it that way. It processes, it stores, it absorbs. So when you lie in bed with resentment in your chest or failure on repeat in your mind, you're not just suffering in the moment, you're shaping your identity around those thoughts. This is why it's so important to be conscious of what you carry with you into sleep, because it's not just about what happened that day, it's about what you choose to hold on to. Letting something sit in your mind for hours, especially during the most vulnerable moments before you drift off, gives it power. And the mind doesn't care whether that power builds you or breaks you. It just follows instructions. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." But you could just as easily say, "We are what we repeatedly think," especially when those thoughts are left alone, unchecked at night. Most people go to sleep replaying conversations, doubting their decisions, or worrying about tomorrow. They don't even realize they're rehearsing their own suffering. They think they're just reflecting or venting or processing. But what's really happening is reinforcement. Every time you repeat a painful memory or let your mind spiral around an anxious thought, you're reinforcing a version of yourself, one rooted in fear, regret, or helplessness. And when that version of you becomes familiar, your nervous system adopts it as normal. That's why you wake up tired even after 8 hours, because mentally you never stopped carrying the weight Plato taught that the soul becomes like that which it contemplates. If you end your day dwelling on defeat or bitterness, your soul adjusts itself to match. You wake up slightly more tense, more guarded, more reactive, and you don't know why. But if you end your day contemplating peace, strength, or truth, you wake up just a little clearer, a little calmer, not because the world changed, but because you did. Because the night gave you a chance to re-enter, and you took it. Think about how many times you've gone to bed thinking about someone who hurt you or a situation that made you feel small. How many times you've fallen asleep in the grip of comparison or shame, wondering if you're enough. These thoughts don't just vanish overnight, they settle deeper. Carl Jung warned that what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. So when you resist your emotions instead of meeting them with understanding, they don't disappear, they follow you. They shape how you speak, how you make decisions, how you see yourself. But there's another way. There's a quieter, more powerful approach. One that requires discipline, not denial. It starts with asking yourself one thing before bed. What am I choosing to carry into tomorrow? Because make no mistake, that's what's happening. You are not just ending a day, you're preparing the next one. The emotions you allow to marinate in silence become the background music for your morning thoughts, your habits, your moods. And when repeated, they form the inner script that plays unconsciously throughout your life. This is why the Stoics practiced nightly introspection, not to dwell, but to clear, to examine without judgment, to let go of what didn't serve their virtue and reinforce what did. Marcus Aurelius would write to himself each evening, reminding his mind to stay aligned with reason, with justice, with calm. He wasn't trying to be perfect. He was trying to be intentional, to make sure the thoughts he brought to bed would not lead him further from the person he was trying to become. You don't have to fix everything before you sleep. That's not the goal. You just have to be aware. Awareness alone is enough to begin shifting the pattern. When you become conscious of what you're rehearsing, you create a gap, a moment to decide whether this is something worth taking into the night with you, and in that moment, you have power. You can release. You can replace. You can choose a thought that strengthens you instead of one that weakens you, and slowly that choice becomes who you are. The identity you build isn't created through grand gestures or once-in-a-lifetime moments. It's built through the repeated quiet choices you make when no one's watching, especially when you're alone with your mind, especially right before sleep, when you're most honest, most vulnerable. That's where real change begins. Not in the chaos of the day, but in the stillness of the night when you get to decide, what am I feeding my subconscious? Socrates said, the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Let that be your anchor. Let that guide how you close your day. Don't fall into the trap of reliving every mistake, every awkward moment, every unkind word that isn't healing. That's mental self-harm disguised as reflection. Healing happens when you stop feeding the loop and start choosing a different story. When you decide not to carry shame but clarity, not resentment but understanding, not anxiety but faith. And no, this doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means holding your pain with compassion instead of judgment. It means telling yourself, yes, today was hard, but I don't have to bring that hardness into my rest. It means reminding yourself that growth isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as whispering a better thought to yourself and letting it echo through the silence of sleep. The mind remembers what it's told. Most often, it believes what you repeat. So, the most powerful thing you can do is train it to believe in your ability to rise, to handle difficulty, to stay grounded no matter what the world throws at you. Not because you forced yourself to believe it during the day, but because you rehearsed it in the quiet when the world was gone and only you remained. That version of you, the one that carries peace instead of panic, the one that chooses wisdom over worry, doesn't come from luck. It comes from what you carry to bed and what you let go of before you close your eyes. At night, the world goes silent. but your mind speaks louder. Without the noise of conversations, responsibilities, or distractions, your thoughts finally have the stage all to themselves. And that's exactly when your deepest beliefs, your real fears, and the stories you've been telling yourself rise to the surface. What most people don't realize is that this quiet isn't just background noise, it's programming. It's in these final moments before sleep that your mind is most open, most sensitive, and most likely to accept whatever you feed it. And what it accepts becomes the foundation of your reality the next day. During sleep, your conscious guard drops. Your subconscious mind, the part of you that drives 95% of your thoughts, feelings, and decisions, goes to work. It doesn't judge, it doesn't question, it just absorbs and repeats. If you go to sleep thinking you're not good enough, that thought doesn't just vanish by morning. It lingers. It affects how you interpret people's reactions. It influences how confident you feel, how willing you are to take risks, how you talk to yourself when something doesn't go your way. Sleep doesn't reset the mind, it reinforces it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's exactly what happens with nighttime thoughts. They become the script your subconscious runs on, and because most people never question that script, they wake up and walk through the day unknowingly acting out last night's doubts. They wonder why they keep falling into the same emotional patterns, the same cycles of overthinking or avoidance. But the answer was planted the night before, quietly, consistently, invisibly. The Stoics believed that control begins in the mind, not in the world. And the most overlooked place to practice that control is right before you fall asleep. It's easy to think that your day starts in the morning, but in reality, it begins the night before. The tone of your day is set by the last few thoughts you allow to settle into your nervous system. That's the soil. And whatever you plant there, worry, hope, bitterness, gratitude, that's what will grow when the sun comes up. If you sleep in stress, you wake up in survival mode. Your brain is already scanning for threats, already looking for what might go wrong. You become reactive instead of grounded. You carry that tension into conversations, into decisions, even into your posture. On the other hand, if you sleep in peace, even if everything in your life isn't perfect, you start your day with a steadier foundation. You don't need everything to be okay. You just need your inner world to be clear enough not to distort the way you see the outer one. Plato wrote that the beginning is the most important part of the work, and your day begins long before your alarm clock. It begins with what you let echo in your mind as you drift off. So if you're filling that time with social media, news, or mental loops of regret, don't be surprised when your morning feels heavy. You're not broken. You're just following the emotional trail you left for yourself the night before. And it's not just about positive thinking or saying affirmations. It's about aligning with thoughts that are true, thoughts that pull you toward your better nature. Like, I'm allowed to let go of what I can't control, or this setback doesn't define me, or even just, I made it through today and I'm still here. These aren't fantasies, they're truths we forget in the noise of the day, but remember in the quiet of the night. If we give ourselves the chance, Socrates once urged his students to care more for the soul than for the body. But how many of us care for our soul before bed? We brush our teeth. We set our alarms, but we don't cleanse the mind. We don't pause to check what stories we're about to reinforce. And then we wonder why life feels like it's happening to us instead of through us. But it's not fate. It's habit. It's repetition. It's letting old thoughts run the show because we never chose new ones before the curtain closed. This is why reflection at night matters, not for guilt or shame, but for clarity. You ask yourself, what am I holding on to that doesn't serve me anymore? And even if you don't have all the answers, just asking that question opens the door. It tells your subconscious, I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to see this differently. And that willingness is powerful, because change doesn't need perfection. It needs intention. When you go to sleep carrying peace, you wake up with power, not power over other people, but power over your own mind. The power to respond instead of react. The power to stay grounded when others are chaotic. The power to choose your next step, even when fear is whispering in your ear. That kind of strength doesn't come from willpower alone. It comes from planting the right thoughts during the hours no one sees. The reality you live tomorrow is being written by the thoughts you entertain tonight. That's not a warning. It's a gift, because it means you're not stuck. You're not doomed to repeat the same emotional stories. You can intervene. You can rewrite one thought at a time, one night at a time. The mind never stops working, so give it something worth working with. That's the hidden power of nighttime. Not just to rest, but to realign. Not just to escape, but to evolve. If you let that truth in, really let it in, you'll stop treating sleep like an end and start treating it like a beginning. Overthinking wears a clever disguise. It shows up looking like concern, preparation, responsibility. It tells you you're just being thorough, that you're making sure nothing goes wrong. But behind that mask, overthinking is quietly draining your energy and confidence. It pretends to protect you while secretly imprisoning you inside a mental loop with no exit. What seems like reflection is actually rumination. Thoughts spinning in circles, never landing anywhere useful. Reflection helps you grow. It brings clarity, acceptance, and sometimes resolution. But overthinking, it keeps you stuck. You replay the same conversation, analyzing every word. You predict disasters that haven't happened. You create arguments in your head that you never actually have. It's mental noise, not mental clarity. And the more time you spend there, the harder it becomes to trust yourself. Because now, every decision is filtered through fear. Aristotle taught that the energy of the mind is the essence of life. That energy, when wasted on repetitive, unproductive thinking, leaves you drained before you've even started your day. You wake up already behind, already worried, already rehearsing conversations or outcomes that may never come. That isn't clarity. That's cognitive exhaustion dressed up as responsibility. The danger of overthinking is that it feels productive. You think you're solving something. You believe that if you can just figure it out now, you'll be at peace. But peace doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. It comes from letting your thoughts pass like clouds, rather than trying to grab each one and examine it under a microscope. Not everything requires analysis. Not every feeling deserves your full attention. Carl Jung warned, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. That's what overthinking does. It amplifies the very thing you're trying to resolve. You start with one small worry, and within minutes it grows teeth. Suddenly your mind is racing through every failure, every rejection, every fear. You're no longer thinking. You're reacting to imagined scenarios your body now treats as real. There's a subtle but crucial difference between awareness and obsession. Reflection asks, what can I learn from this? Overthinking asks, what could go wrong with this? Reflection opens a window. Overthinking shuts a door and traps you inside. It leads to self-doubt, hesitation, and often paralysis. You end up avoiding action altogether because no option feels safe anymore. And so, ironically, the fear you are trying to prevent, failure, rejection, regret, becomes more likely because you're too frozen to move. The Stoics had no patience for this kind of mental indulgence. Epictetus taught that it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Overthinking is the habit of misjudgment. You assume the worst. You give weight to possibilities instead of facts. You respond not to what is, but to what might be. And in doing so, you create your own suffering. So how do you stop? Not by force, not by yelling at yourself to just relax. That never works. The key is to gently shift the mind's focus. First, you observe. You say, I see this thought. I don't have to follow it. And then you redirect maybe to your breath, maybe to a mantra, maybe to a single grounding truth, like I don't need to solve everything right now. One powerful practice is categorizing your thoughts. When something arises, ask yourself, is this useful? If it's something you can act on, something within your control, it's worth keeping. If it's outside your control or based on fear, let it go. Don't argue with it. Don't try to suppress it. Just don't give it fuel. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, reminded himself that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Overthinking happens when we reverse that, when we try to control outside events with our mind, when we believe that thinking hard enough will protect us from pain. But pain is part of life, and thinking about it endlessly won't prevent it. It just brings it forward before it even arrives. Reflection is a flashlight. Overthinking is a strobe light. One helps you see, the other blinds you. The goal isn't to stop thinking. It's to think better, to choose thoughts that serve you, that guide you, that calm you. Let your mind rest. Let it process without interference. Your subconscious is wise. It knows what to do if you'll just stop interrupting it with noise. Before bed, this matters even more because your mind doesn't turn off when you sleep. It continues to process whatever you last gave it. If you feed it fear, it will echo fear all night. If you feed it clarity, it will settle. That's not philosophy, that's neuroscience. Your brain consolidates memories and emotions while you sleep. What you think about at night becomes your emotional reality by morning. That's why overthinking at night is one of the most damaging habits you can carry. It poisons the subconscious. It keeps your nervous system activated. It denies your body and mind the chance to repair. And when repeated often enough, it becomes a default setting. You stop being a thinker and start being a worrier. That identity shift happens quietly, almost unnoticeably, but it changes everything. But here's the truth most people miss. You are not your thoughts. You are the one watching them. You can step back. You can listen without obeying. You can choose not to follow every story your mind spins. That's where real power begins. Not in thinking more, but in thinking less and with more intention. Overthinking isn't intelligence, it's hesitation. It's a symptom of fear, dressed up as logic. And once you recognize that, you can start creating space between you and your thoughts. You can say, not now, not this thought, not tonight. And that small moment of distance, that's freedom. That's clarity. That's the beginning of breaking the cycle of self-sabotage and stepping into a life led by intention rather than anxiety. Not because you've silenced your mind, but because you've learned how to guide it. The Stoics understood something about sleep that most of us have completely forgotten. Sleep isn't just physical rest. It's mental preparation. It's not just about closing your eyes and shutting off your body. It's about what you carry into the darkness and how that shapes who you become when the light returns. They saw sleep as a sacred transition, a daily death of sorts, where your mind sheds the noise of the day and prepares to rise wiser, calmer, and more in control. In the modern world, though, we treat it like a pause button, a passive activity, something we do after we've drained every ounce of our attention, scrolling, worrying, racing to fit more into a day that already demands too much. But to the Stoics, sleep wasn't an escape. It was an opportunity, a time when the soul could return to itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive." But that insight wasn't born in the morning. It was prepared the night before in silence, in reflection, in stillness. He believed in ending each day with thought, with gratitude, and with inner review. Not to punish the self, but to purify it. Because if you don't clear your mind before you rest, you carry that mental clutter into tomorrow. And cluttered minds don't create clear lives. Modern life is obsessed with sleep hacks, blue light filters, weighted blankets, apps that play ocean waves on loop. But the Stoics didn't need tricks. They practiced presence, detachment, and most importantly, self-discipline. They knew that how you enter sleep shapes how you wake up. They prepared their minds like a warrior sharpens their sword before battle. They didn't fall asleep to avoid life. They used it to master it. Seneca warned against going to bed without examining the day. He'd ask himself, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What can I do better tomorrow? This wasn't guilt-driven. It was driven by growth, by a desire to live more intentionally, not just exist reactively. He wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live. That learning doesn't stop when the sun goes down. In fact, it begins there." Because here's the truth. Your mind is still active while you sleep. Science now confirms what the Stoics intuited centuries ago. The brain organizes information, processes emotion, and even rehearses responses to future challenges, all while you sleep. So whatever emotional state or mental content you bring into that space, your brain treats as important. If you sleep angry, anxious, or scrolling through chaos, your brain stores that emotional tone, and you wake up already shaped by it. This is why Stoics practiced evening reflection, not because it was cute or spiritual, but because it was strategic. They understood that what you rehearse becomes who you are. And if your final thoughts before sleep are thoughts of fear, comparison, regret, or shallow stimulation, you're training your subconscious to normalize that chaos. Plato believed the soul was divided into three parts: the rationale, the spirited, and the appetitive. And when those were in harmony, a person could live with virtue, but when they were in conflict, inner suffering followed. Nighttime for the Stoics was a time to restore that inner harmony, to remind the rational part of its power, to calm the emotional storms, to quiet the cravings of the body and bring everything back to center. So the next day, you didn't have to fight yourself. You could just be yourself. But what have we done instead? We've turned bedtime into a battleground. Screens blast us with images. Our thoughts spiral through worries we can't control. We replay conversations, imagine worst-case scenarios, and let external noise seep into the most vulnerable space of the day. We don't prepare for rest. We collapse into it, hoping for peace without actually creating it. The Stoics would have found that tragic because to them, sleep was a ritual of power, not weakness. It was a time to reconnect with nature's rhythm, to remember that we are not machines meant to run 24/7, but humans built to cycle between action and renewal. Nature does nothing in vain, Aristotle wrote, and that includes sleep. It's not wasted time, it's necessary time. If you use it well, it doesn't just heal your body, it refines your mind. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What you feed your unconscious before bed becomes the foundation of your waking life. That's why the Stoics guarded the gate to their sleep. They didn't allow anything to enter lightly. They chose their final thoughts with care, because they knew those thoughts would echo long after the eyes closed. So maybe it's time to stop treating sleep like a shutdown and start treating it like a ceremony, a daily rite of passage from one version of yourself to the next. You can fill that space with fear or with philosophy, with mindless content or with timeless wisdom. The choice is yours. But what you choose will shape more than just your dreams. It will shape your discipline, your energy, your emotional resilience, all the things that define who you are when you're awake. And if you're seeking strength, calm, and control, not as a fantasy, but as a lived experience, it doesn't start with a productivity hack. It starts with what the Stoics knew, that how you end your day is how you build your life. And the thoughts you fall asleep with, they don't just disappear, they become your reality. It's not always the long hours or endless to-do lists that leave us drained. It's the emotional clutter we carry. Quiet, invisible, but heavy. Most people go to bed believing they're just physically tired. But what they're really experiencing is the weight of unspoken frustration, unresolved conversations, and lingering disappointments, the kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They knew that true fatigue begins in the mind, not the muscles. And yet today, we rarely think to ask ourselves what emotional baggage we're dragging into the night, or how it's silently shaping the way we wake up. You might have noticed it yourself. You sleep for 8 hours, but wake up feeling like you haven't rested at all. That's not just poor sleep hygiene. It's the residue of thoughts that were never sorted, emotions that were never released. Aristotle believed that moderation and balance were the key to a well-lived life, but emotional imbalance, especially when ignored, accumulates like noise in the background. A single moment of irritation left unaddressed turns into hours of internal replays. A small failure, instead of being let go, morphs into a self-judgment loop that runs even in your dreams. Think about how much space these emotions take up. You replay a disagreement from earlier, analyzing what you should have said. You anticipate a meeting tomorrow with dread, rehearsing worst-case scenarios in your head. These thoughts aren't productive, but they feel urgent. That's the trap. They masquerade as necessary planning, but they're really just emotional clutter disguised as preparation. Carl Jung warned us that what you resist not only persists but grows. When we don't acknowledge and release emotional weight, it doesn't go away, it compounds. And here's where it gets dangerous. Emotional clutter doesn't just make you tired, it changes your perception. You become more reactive, more defensive, less creative. The mind, when overloaded with unresolved emotion, starts interpreting even neutral situations through a lens of stress. A simple email feels like a personal attack. A quiet room feels like loneliness. You lose your ability to respond calmly because the internal space needed for clarity is already crowded. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And this is the perfect example. Emotional clutter creates imaginary battles and then convinces you they're real. Sleep is supposed to be a reset, a full system reboot. But for many, it becomes just another arena where the day's emotions continue to fight for attention. The brain doesn't shut off at night. It processes, it replays, and it sorts through everything you didn't resolve during the day. That's why going to bed without clearing emotional residue leads to vivid dreams, restlessness, and waking up already in a mental fog. The Stoics would say this is preventable, but only if you're willing to do the work. Not complicated work, but intentional. A few minutes of genuine self-reflection, a quiet moment to ask, what am I holding on to that I don't need to carry anymore? This is not about suppressing emotions. It's about detaching from them with clarity. There's a difference between feeling something and being consumed by it. The Stoics didn't believe in pretending life was always calm. They faced pain, loss, and uncertainty with open eyes. But they trained their minds not to hold on to what couldn't be controlled. They believed that emotional discipline wasn't cold. It was courageous. Letting go doesn't mean you're numb. It means you've chosen peace over chaos, clarity over clutter. And don't underestimate how fast emotional clutter builds. It doesn't take major life events. It builds from the little things. A moment of self-doubt, a comment from someone that landed wrong, a task you didn't finish and now feel guilty about left unchecked. These stack up silently until the weight becomes unbearable. But because we're used to this internal noise, we normalize it. We tell ourselves it's just stress, it's just life. But it isn't. It's accumulated, unattended emotional energy that hasn't been processed or released. This is why the Stoics emphasized daily mental hygiene. Just as you wash your face and brush your teeth, they believed in cleansing the mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or think or do, only what you do. That tranquility doesn't appear by accident. It's a result of intentional clearing every night before the clutter turns into fatigue, burnout, or emotional numbness. You don't need an hour. You don't need a ritual with candles and soft music. You need awareness. You need honesty. You need to be willing to sit with your thoughts and feel what needs to be felt, and then release what no longer serves a purpose. Ask yourself, did anything today make me feel small, angry, insecure, or ashamed? Not to dwell, but to identify. Because the moment you name it, you give yourself the power to release it. This practice becomes even more important when life feels overwhelming. When everything's moving fast, emotional clutter builds even faster. That's when stillness becomes not a luxury, but a necessity. You won't find stillness by accident. You have to create it. And the best time to do that is right before sleep, when your mind is most vulnerable to suggestion, most open to transformation. The same way you don't go to bed with dirty clothes, don't go to bed with a dirty mind, cluttered with thoughts that steal your peace. Emotional clarity is a form of strength, and like any strength, it's built in small moments. Choosing not to replay that insult, choosing not to carry that insecurity, choosing not to give power to a fear that hasn't even materialized. Every choice you make before bed either adds to the clutter or clears it. And the beautiful part is, you don't need to fix everything before sleep. You just need to let go of the idea that you must fix everything right now. Plato taught that the first and best victory is to conquer self. Emotional clutter makes that victory impossible. It keeps you at war with yourself, with your past, with your fears. But the path to peace isn't complicated. It's choosing moment by moment to release, to not argue with reality, to not grip so tightly to things already gone. You'll know you've started this process when you stop needing to win your arguments in your head. When you stop obsessing over what they meant or how you came across, you'll start to feel lighter, not because the world changed, but because you did. Because you've begun to understand that peace doesn't come from controlling every detail. It comes from refusing to be ruled by thoughts that only exist to exhaust you. Emotional clutter is the real source of exhaustion, not your schedule, not your responsibilities, not even the chaos around you. It's the chaos within, and it can be cleared night after night, choice by choice, until you wake up not just rested, but free. When they're feeling stressed, most people try to add more to their lives, like more goals, more inspiration, or more ways to be more productive. What if, though, the real answer wasn't to add anything? What if it was about giving up? Mind cleaning is all about that. Also, it's not a new word for self-help. It's going back to something very normal, something the Stoics did all the time. To be able to empty your mind, not fill it. Not to fix yourself, but to free yourself. He once said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." That's the important thing. Things that happen to you aren't the only things that matter. You don't forget when you let go. That's not acting like nothing happened. Giving yourself permission to let go of something that has hurt you already is what it means. Think about what you have in your hands at the moment. What other people think of you, the fear of not being enough, or the push to be more than you are. These are not facts. They are weights that you can't see. But they are really heavy for your nerve system. Your chest gets tight, your shoulders tense up, and your sleep gets lighter, because the residue stays even after the moment is over. But there's a catch. Mental mess gets worse. One small worry turns into a chain of bad thoughts. One bad experience changes your whole day. As Carl Jung warned, your unconscious will run your life until you make it aware. You will then call it fate. That's why letting go keeps you from thinking that your feelings are really you. They're not. They are guests, and some of them don't deserve to stay, just like any other guest. Being aware is the first step in the process. You can't let go of something you won't name. Writing in a book helps with that. It's not magic that it solves your problems, it just takes the chaos out of your thoughts and puts it somewhere else. Writing is a way to separate from things. It states, "This belongs to me, but it isn't me." That space between them makes room, and things start to become clear in that room, not flashy or sudden, but steady and true. Being okay with it is the next step. There may not be a way to end everything you're holding on to. Some people won't say sorry. Things will not always make sense. You don't have to fully understand something in order to let it go. It means you have chosen not to let anger or confusion control your life. Socrates thought that life without questioning it wasn't worth living. But many people make this mistake. They think about their pain for so long that they forget to let it go. Don't think too much about what you're doing to understand it well enough to say, "I learned what I needed to. It's time to move on." A real cleaning for the mind doesn't happen just once. You make it every day, like when you clean your room before bed. You don't wait until it's too dangerous to live in. You take care of it little by little. A short time of silence, a walk without your phone, writing in your diary for one page, and being able to say no when you want to. When you're scared, say yes. Even though they look small, each one is a sign for you. I'm no longer here to carry something that doesn't help me. You're not soft when you let go. It helps you concentrate. You start to see what's important. You know that not every thought is important. Not every feeling needs an answer. Not every situation needs your full attention. As Aristotle said, wisdom is found in the middle ground between two extremes. Letting go is the middle ground between caring and worrying, being responsible and selfless, and being aware and in charge. As well, letting go of something painful makes you stronger, not because it wasn't true, but because you'd rather have peace than proof. You don't have to solve the puzzle in your mind. You don't have to explain your pain to anyone. You only need to choose peace over being right, that being clear is stronger than being closed off, and that your mind needs to be free. Getting clean in your mind is all about trust. Having faith that what's behind you doesn't need to be dragged ahead. Having faith that your mind works better when it's not busy. Have faith that letting go isn't loss. That's freedom. That's when you start to notice something else, even if it's just a little. You take longer breaths. You think less quickly. The voice inside you gets quieter. Not quiet, but not too crazy either. And there is something amazing that happens in the quiet. You feel more like yourself now. This is what the Stoics wanted. Not an ideal life, but a calm one. A mind that is steady, present, and free of the weight of what doesn't fit one, that isn't always chasing, fighting, or replaying. Don't ask what you need to do the next time your mind is heavy. Find out what you're ready to let go of. That's where the real power is. Most people go to bed thinking they need to fix something, a broken relationship, an unfinished task, a regret from earlier in the day. The mind stays active, not because there's action to take, but because it's unwilling to let the thought pass, and that's the real problem. It's not that we're thinking too much, it's that we're refusing to stop. The mind believes that if it just thinks one more time, it will finally figure everything out. But the truth is, most of the time there's nothing to solve. There's only something to release. There's a difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection is clarity. It helps you grow, understand, and move forward. Rumination, though, is a trap. It feels like you're being productive because you're thinking so intensely, but you're really just spinning in circles. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." The more you try to force closure with your thoughts, the more power they take. You can't force the mind to settle by adding more thought to it. Just like you can't calm a storm by shouting over the wind. The world teaches us that we must always act, always fix, always improve. But sometimes the deepest wisdom comes from doing nothing, from letting a thought rise and fall without grabbing onto it. Not every emotion needs a response. Not every problem is meant to be handled at midnight. Sleep is not the time to sort through everything. It's the time to let it float by, like clouds passing through an open sky. That's not avoidance. It's wisdom. We've been conditioned to treat every thought like an emergency, something urgent, something important. But think about how many of those late-night worries still mattered the next day. Think about how often you've lost sleep over a conversation that turned out to be meaningless. That's the cycle. The mind craves control, so it tries to untangle things in the quiet hours. But the Stoics knew better. Epictetus reminded us, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters, and your reaction doesn't always need to be action. Sometimes it needs to be silence, stillness, space." Letting go is not about being careless. It's about recognizing that you've done what you can. You've shown up. You've tried. You've thought about it enough. the rest that belongs to time or to someone else or to something greater than your own mind. You release it, not because it's solved, but because holding on to it is doing more harm than good. Holding on robs you of rest. And when you lose rest, you lose perspective, the ability to respond calmly, the strength to carry on, the clarity to see what really matters. People often think they need more motivation, more tools, more breakthroughs, but sometimes what they really need is less noise, less pressure, less mental weight. The strongest people aren't the ones who hold on to everything. They're the ones who know when to let go. Socrates once said, "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." The same is true for the mind. A mind too busy solving everything has no room to breathe, no space to heal, no capacity to enjoy peace. Before bed, we must retrain the mind. Instead of asking, "How do I fix this?" try asking, "Can I let this go for now?" That shift in focus makes all the difference. You begin to notice that most of what keeps you up isn't the situation itself. It's your unwillingness to release it. You've made it a part of your identity. You've convinced yourself that if you stop thinking about it, it'll spiral out of control. But ironically, letting go is what brings things back into balance. Psychologically, detachment is one of the most powerful tools we have. It doesn't mean we stop caring, it means we stop carrying. Aristotle taught that the energy of the mind is the essence of life. So, where's your energy going? Into loops you've already walked through 100 times. Into fears that haven't even happened. Into emotions that aren't serving any real purpose. Then maybe the bravest thing you can do tonight is simply this. Drop it, set it down, and see who you are without that weight. Even when things are unresolved, you still deserve rest. Even when the day felt like a failure, you still deserve peace. That's not weakness, that's strength, because the person who can put down their thoughts before sleep is the person who will rise the next day stronger, more focused, more present, more prepared. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about your mental clarity to stop bleeding energy into what you can't control. The mind is not a machine that's meant to run all night. It's a garden. It needs time to rest, to grow, to breathe. You don't need to solve everything. You just need to trust that peace is possible even when answers aren't. And that's what the Stoics knew. That clarity isn't found in holding on tighter, it's found in releasing the grip, in walking away from the war inside your own head and saying, "Not tonight." It's found in the quiet discipline of surrender. And in that surrender, the mind doesn't collapse, it expands, it opens, it finds room again, and that's where peace begins. There's a reason your thoughts feel louder at night. It's not because there's more going on, it's because there's less noise, less distraction, less demand for your attention from the outside world. And in that stillness, the mind finally becomes visible. You start to notice the patterns that were running silently in the background all day. The worries, the doubts, the unspoken fears, they rise like echoes in an empty room. And here's the truth. That silence, as uncomfortable as it might feel, is your greatest opportunity, because the mind is most impressionable in the dark. You don't train a warrior on the battlefield, you train them in quiet, in private, in repetition. The same is true for the mind. When you're not being pulled in 10 different directions, when you're not reacting to life, but sitting still with it, that's when transformation happens. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." The night invites you to look in, not to escape the world, but to confront the parts of yourself that can't hide when the lights are off. The brain doesn't stop working just because the day is over. In fact, your subconscious becomes more active while you sleep. That's when it processes your emotions, your memories, your beliefs. So, the thoughts you allow in those final moments before sleep don't just fade into the dark, they're carried deeper. They settle into your wiring. That's why the Stoics reflected at night, not to beat themselves up, but to program their minds on purpose. Marcus Aurelius, after ruling an empire, would sit with his journal and ask, "What did I do well? What could I have done better? What am I holding on to that needs to be released?" It wasn't ritual, it was reinforcement. Modern life makes this harder. The blue glow of a screen, the endless scroll, the background noise we call comfort. But when you strip all that away, you return to the state the Stoics mastered, conscious stillness, that moment when you can see your own mind and choose what stays. Training the mind doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't require loud affirmations or motivational speeches. Sometimes it just means sitting in silence and watching what thoughts come without trying to change them. Not reacting, just observing. That alone is practice. That alone is progress. Aristotle believed that excellence is not an act, but a habit. He wasn't talking about public victories. He was talking about private discipline, the habits formed when no one's watching. And the most consistent habit we all share is sleep. Night comes whether we want it or not. The question is, what are we doing with that window? Most people use it to numb or escape. But what if you used it to rewire? What if every night was a lesson in patience, in clarity, in letting go? The mind is softest when it's tired. It resists less. It listens more. That's why it's the perfect time to speak truths into it. Not loud ones, but steady ones. Simple reminders: I've done enough today. Not everything needs to be solved right now. My peace does not depend on perfection. Over time, these statements become anchors. They catch you when you start to spiral. They replace the old scripts, the ones written in fear, in shame, in pressure, with something more grounded, more real. This isn't wishful thinking. It's how neural pathways are built. Psychology confirms what the Stoics practiced. Repetition rewires. The thoughts you return to most often become the default setting. And at night, your conscious filters relax. Your guard is down. That's not a weakness. It's a window. A chance to speak directly to the part of you that drives most of your actions, and what you give it in those moments becomes who you are the next morning. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, but what he implied is this: you don't need a dramatic life to reflect. You just need a moment, and there is no better moment than the one right before sleep. When the world is quiet and you can finally hear your own thoughts clearly, that's the moment to ask yourself what you're carrying into tomorrow, what you're letting go of, what kind of mind you're choosing to build: calm or chaotic, open or closed, reactive or resilient. Training your mind doesn't happen through force. It happens through exposure, through repeated alignment with who you truly want to be. And night is when you get to choose that without noise or distraction. So the next time your mind feels heavy when the lights go out, don't run from it. That weight, that discomfort, that's the door. Step through it. Sit with it. Speak to it with the calm authority of someone who knows they are not their thoughts, and then gently, deliberately train the mind to let go. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. That's how the strongest minds are built. Not in public, not in daylight, but in the quiet dark, where every thought becomes a seed and every choice becomes a step toward who you were always meant to be. The subconscious doesn't respond to passion. It responds to patterns. It doesn't care how inspired you feel in a single moment. What it's paying attention to is what you do over and over again. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think change happens when you feel a spark, when you hear something powerful once, or when you're in the mood to improve. But your subconscious is not looking for fireworks. It's watching for consistency. Repetition is the language of the subconscious. That's why it takes root, not when you shout affirmations at yourself in the mirror once, but when you quietly repeat a truth until it becomes natural, until it no longer feels like a new belief, but a baseline. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is what repetition does. It drags unconscious programming into the light and gives you the chance to rewrite it. Most of what you believe about yourself wasn't chosen. It was learned slowly through repetition. If you were told as a child that you weren't good enough, maybe not directly, but through small cues, repeated dismissals, subtle emotional coldness, those messages sank in, not because they were true, but because they were frequent. The brain, especially when young or emotionally vulnerable, doesn't evaluate truth based on logic. It evaluates truth based on exposure. What it hears often, it assumes, must be real. This is how self-doubt is planted, and it's also how confidence can be rebuilt. When you go to bed thinking thoughts like, "I'll never be enough," or "I don't have what it takes," those aren't just passing ideas. They're instructions. They're cues to the subconscious, and the more often they're repeated, especially in the vulnerable moments before sleep, the deeper they settle. That's why replacing those with deliberate, clear, simple truths matters. Not poetic ones, not overly grand ones, just steady, believable ones. "I can improve. This feeling will pass. I am learning to let go." They don't have to feel powerful right away. They just have to be repeated. Repetition doesn't care about intensity. It cares about frequency. A single emotionally charged thought might catch your attention, but a repeated thought rewires your expectations. It sets the default. It becomes the internal voice that speaks before you even realize it's speaking. That's the real power. Not the shout, but the whisper that repeats itself so often it becomes part of you. And the whisper is shaped by what you allow yourself to think when no one is watching, especially in the quiet of night. The Stoics didn't just think about virtue. They repeated their values daily. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait until things fell apart to remind himself of what mattered. He wrote down the same truths again and again about impermanence, about control, about responsibility. Why? Because he understood that a single insight, no matter how profound, won't stand against daily stress unless it's reinforced. As Epictetus put it, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Saying it once is not enough. You have to say it every day. This isn't about blind repetition. It's not about forcing yourself to believe something that isn't aligned with reality. It's about choosing thoughts that serve you and reinforcing them until your subconscious takes over. Think about it. How did you learn to walk or drive or even speak your native language? Through countless tiny repeated movements, mistakes were made. Corrections followed. But over time, the brain said, "Okay, I get it. I'll take it from here." The same process applies to emotional discipline, to clarity, to calm. When you repeat thoughts like, "I can't handle this," or "This always happens to me." Your subconscious begins to shape your actions, your tone, your posture to match that story. But when you consistently offer it a new script, "I'm adapting. I've made it through worse." Not everything needs a reaction. You're not just speaking differently, you're building new wiring. And over time, your emotional responses begin to change without you forcing it. Plato wrote, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." But how is that done? Through consistent mental training, through replacing chaos with structure, one small moment at a time. And repetition is the tool. The quiet ritual of saying the same thing again and again and again until it no longer feels like an effort, until it feels like you. That's how people become grounded. Not by chasing peak emotions, but by choosing a message and returning to it until it sticks. This is why the moments before sleep matter so much. It's the window where the mind is no longer distracted, no longer resisting. It's soft, open, and if you feed it fear, it will rehearse anxiety while you sleep. But if you feed it discipline softly, gently, with repetition, it will begin to trust that discipline. It will make it the default. So when you wake up and the challenges come, you're not scrambling to remember how to think. You're already thinking from a stronger foundation. Repetition is how belief becomes identity. Not just what you think, but who you are. And this works both ways. If you're not choosing your repeated thoughts, someone else's algorithms, headlines, unhealed pasts, they all want to offer their scripts, and they'll succeed if you don't interrupt them with your own. That's not paranoia. That's awareness. And that awareness is your power. So keep it simple. Choose a few truths that you want to embody, not ones that hype you up for a moment, but ones that center you for a lifetime. Write them, speak them, whisper them before sleep, repeat them in the morning, and do it again the next day. Because the subconscious doesn't need to be yelled at, it just needs to know you're serious. And seriousness in the world of the mind is measured by repetition. Over time, what you repeat becomes what you expect. What you expect shapes what you notice, and what you notice begins to form your experience of life. So don't underestimate the quiet power of a simple truth repeated often. That's how the inner world is reprogrammed. That's how the unshakable mind is built, not all at once, but line by line, word by word, night by night. Most people think identity is formed in the heat of action. When you're facing a challenge, stepping up, making a decision. But identity at its core is not built in those moments. It's revealed in them. The real construction happens in the quiet, in the dark, when you're not consciously trying to be anything at all. That's the paradox. You become who you are not when you're performing, but when you're at rest. When your defenses are down, your conscious mind is still, and all that's left is the story you've silently repeated to yourself 1,000 times. That's the blueprint your subconscious keeps building from. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And that's exactly why the nighttime matters. Because at night, when there's no one to impress, no noise to distract, you come face to face with the version of yourself you've created without even knowing it. What you believe about yourself when nobody's watching is what truly defines you. It's not the polished words or the conscious affirmations. It's the internal voice that speaks when you're too tired to pretend. The hours before you fall asleep are not passive. They are formative. Your brain doesn't just shut off. It reorganizes, it reviews, it encodes, and the thoughts that linger, especially those repeated in emotional tones, get tagged as important. Moving forward, Most people think the night is just the end of the day, a pause between what was and what will be. They switch off the light, fall into bed, and carry the same worries, the same doubts, the same noise from the day. But here's what they don't realize. The mind never sleeps. Your body may rest, but your subconscious keeps working. And whatever you plant in it right before you close your eyes, those last thoughts, those last feelings, that's the seed that grows while you sleep. You wake up tomorrow living out the story you wrote the night before. That's why the moments before sleep are the most powerful of the entire day. This is where you can reprogram your thoughts, reshape your character, and redirect your destiny. If you go to bed filled with fear, anger, or complaints, your mind multiplies them in the dark. But if you go to bed with strength, gratitude, and vision, your subconscious spends the night aligning you with that truth. The Stoics knew this long ago. What you feed your mind becomes your life. And science today agrees. Your subconscious accepts what you repeat at night without judgment, without filter, that makes every night a doorway. Every night is a chance to plant something new, and every morning is a new life waiting to grow from it. So tonight and every night after, you hold the choice. Will you fall asleep repeating the same story that holds you back? Or will you write a new one that sets you free? Your body can be exhausted, your eyes heavy, your muscles drained, your breath slowing down as you finally sink into the mattress. But your mind does not shut off. It never has, and it never will. Even when you're deep in sleep, your subconscious keeps running, keeps recording, keeps building the programs that shape the way you wake up the next morning. The truth is, the night doesn't erase the day, it carries it forward. Think about it. Have you ever gone to bed stressed, angry, or worried, and then woken up the next morning feeling the exact same way as if the night had done nothing to heal you? That's because your subconscious took those emotions and kept them alive all night long. Sleep doesn't delete thoughts, it multiplies them. What you give your mind in those final minutes before drifting off becomes the raw material for your dreams, your mood, and your energy when you wake up. The Stoics understood this before science could prove it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What you dwell on becomes who you are. And the quiet hours of the night when your conscious defenses are down are the most powerful time for those thoughts to sink in. In the silence before sleep, you hand your subconscious a script, and tomorrow it plays it out. Now, here's where it gets real. Most people hand their mind the worst kind of script. They scroll endlessly on their phones, feeding their brain with noise, fear, comparison, or empty distraction. They fall asleep replaying arguments, regrets, or self-criticism. And then they wonder why they wake up feeling heavy, unmotivated, or hopeless. But it's not a mystery. The mind never sleeps, and if you feed it garbage, it will spend the night building a garbage life. But it works the other way too. If you feed your mind strength, clarity, gratitude, or vision, it will spend the night weaving those into the fibers of your subconscious. That's why affirmations, visualizations, and intentional thoughts before bed are so powerful. They slip past the noise of the day and go straight into the deepest part of you. It's not magic, it's programming. And every single one of us is being programmed nightly, whether we choose it or not. Think of your mind like a garden. The day scatters seeds everywhere. Stress, joy, anger, hope, fear, love. But at night, your subconscious is the soil that decides what grows. If you don't tend to it, weeds of doubt and negativity will spread on their own. But if you consciously plant seeds of discipline, focus, and strength right before sleep, those are the ones that take root. And when you wake up, you'll feel it. You'll notice your perspective shift. You'll sense a quiet strength rising in you that wasn't there before. This is why the most successful people protect their nights. Athletes visualize their performance before bed. Leaders review their goals. Some people write affirmations or spend a few minutes in gratitude. They're not doing this because it sounds nice. They're doing it because they know the mind never sleeps, and if you leave it unattended, it will run wild. But if you guide it even for a few minutes, it becomes your greatest ally. Ask yourself honestly, what have you been handing your mind at night? Are you giving it fear, anger, and doubt to multiply while you sleep? Or are you giving it strength, purpose, and gratitude to expand in the dark? The choice is always yours. The Stoics would challenge you with this. Don't waste the most powerful part of your day. Don't treat the night as if it's nothing but rest. Treat it as preparation. Treat it as the secret training ground where your mind is shaped for tomorrow. Because the truth is, every night is a rehearsal for the life you will wake up to. That's the first truth. The mind never sleeps. It is always listening, always shaping, always building. The only question is, what story are you letting it write while you dream? Here's something most people never think about. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It doesn't analyze. It doesn't say, wait a second, that thought doesn't make sense. No, the subconscious just takes it in, stores it, and turns it into part of the script that runs your life. That's both the most terrifying truth and the most liberating one. If you go to bed telling yourself, I'm a failure, nothing ever changes, I'm tired of my life, your subconscious accepts those words as commands. It doesn't step in and say, oh, he doesn't really mean that. It quietly writes them down in permanent ink and begins to design your reality around them. The next morning, you wake up carrying the same weight you went to sleep with because your subconscious kept working on it all night. The Stoics would call this slavery, being ruled by thoughts you never chose consciously. Epictetus said, you are what you constantly think about. And if you're constantly feeding your subconscious fear, doubt, or anger, then you're literally programming yourself to live small, anxious, and defeated. Not because you're cursed, not because the world is against you, but because your subconscious never filters the garbage you keep feeding it. Think of it like a sponge. Whatever you soak it in, it absorbs completely. Good or bad, true or false, empowering or destructive. The subconscious doesn't discriminate. That's why people can carry childhood beliefs for decades. A parent might have once said, you're not good enough. You'll never amount to anything. And even though it was just one sentence repeated enough times, it soaked into the subconscious and stayed there. Years later, that adult may still sabotage themselves, not because they lack ability, but because their subconscious is running on that old command. Now here's the good news. This works in your favor too. If you choose carefully what you feed your subconscious, especially at night when it's most open, you can rewrite the script. Imagine closing your eyes each night saying, I am capable. I am disciplined. I'm building the best version of myself. Your subconscious doesn't argue. It just records. And if you repeat it often enough, it begins to feel less like wishful thinking and more like reality. That's the power of affirmations, visualization, and intentional focus before bed. They're not cheesy. They're not just positive thinking. They're commands, and your subconscious obeys them. What you say and imagine with intensity sinks into the deepest part of your mind and eventually reshapes your identity. Think about how dangerous it is when you don't control this process. If you fall asleep scrolling through social media, comparing yourself to everyone else, your subconscious absorbs that if you end your day replaying failures and regrets, your subconscious absorbs that. If the last thing you see is fear-driven news, your subconscious absorbs that too. And the next day you feel drained, insecure, anxious, and you don't even know why. But the reason is simple. Your subconscious is always listening, always recording, always building. This is why the moments before sleep matter so much. Your conscious mind is shutting down, your filters are dropping, and your subconscious is wide open. That's the doorway. That's when you can either poison yourself with negativity or empower yourself with truth. And the choice you make in those minutes determines how you wake up, not just tomorrow, but every day after. The Stoics would challenge you here. They'd say, guard your mind more fiercely than your body, because while your body rests, your mind keeps absorbing. It never stops. It never questions. It just executes. And if you don't take responsibility for what you're feeding it, you're surrendering control of your life. So let me ask you, what are you giving your subconscious every night? Complaints, fear, and doubt, or gratitude, vision, and strength? Because make no mistake, it will take it all in. And tomorrow you'll live out what you planted tonight. That's the second truth. The subconscious takes everything in. No filter, no judgment, no debate, just acceptance. And that means every night you hold incredible power. The power to poison yourself, or the power to reprogram yourself. The choice is always yours. Most people believe the most powerful part of the day is the morning. That first hour when you wake up, when you set your routine, when you plan your goals, and yes, mornings matter. But here's a truth very few people realize. The real power doesn't start when the sun rises. It starts in the quiet minutes before you fall asleep. Why? Because those final moments before sleep are a golden doorway. In that short window, your conscious mind begins to fade. Your defenses drop and your subconscious becomes wide open. It's like the soil is freshly tilled and ready for seeds. Whatever you plant there, whether it's fear or faith, doubt or determination, complaints or vision, grows deep roots through the night. And when you wake up, that's the harvest you live with. Think about it. In the morning, you're already running. The world is loud. Responsibilities are calling. Distractions are everywhere. But at night, in those last minutes before sleep, everything slows down. The outside noise fades. It's just you and your thoughts. And that's exactly why it's the most powerful moment of the day. It's the only time when you have complete control over what enters your mind without interference. The Stoics would have loved this practice. They were masters of nightly reflection. Marcus Aurelius used his evenings to write in his journal, to examine his thoughts, to decide how he wanted to meet tomorrow. He understood that the day doesn't begin when you wake up. It begins when you program your mind the night before. That's wisdom people still miss today. Here's the danger. Most people waste this moment. They spend it scrolling on their phone, filling their mind with comparison, gossip, or fear. They fall asleep watching TV, letting someone else's words, someone else's story, become the last thing their subconscious absorbs. They go to bed with arguments, regrets, or doubts echoing in their head. And then they wonder why their mornings feel heavy, why their energy is low, why they wake up uninspired. It's simple. The most powerful moment of the day was wasted on garbage, and their subconscious spent the whole night multiplying it. But imagine if you use this time differently. Imagine lying down, closing your eyes, and planting thoughts of strength, gratitude, and vision. Imagine repeating affirmations like, I am capable, I am disciplined, I am moving forward. Imagine visualizing the person you want to become, seeing yourself walking with confidence, acting with courage, speaking with clarity. Your subconscious wouldn't fight you. It would accept those seeds, nurture them, and begin weaving them into your identity. And the next morning, instead of waking up heavy, you'd wake up aligned with that vision. That's why these final minutes are so sacred. You don't need an hour. You don't need a big ritual. You only need intention. 5 minutes of conscious focus before sleep is worth more than 5 hours of aimless scrolling. Because the subconscious never sleeps, and it will keep working all night on whatever you gave it. Think about this as spiritual training. Athletes don't just train their bodies, they train their minds. And the last thing you do before sleep is like the last rep of the day. It carries weight. It decides whether you're building yourself up or tearing yourself down. The Stoics would remind you, greatness isn't built in public. It's built in private, in the choices you make when no one else is watching. And there's no moment more private than the one right before you close your eyes. So let me ask you, what are you doing with the most powerful moment of your day? Are you wasting it? Letting distractions and negativity creep into your subconscious? Or are you using it as a weapon, as a tool, as a ritual to build the life you want? That's the third truth. The most powerful moment of your day is not the morning. It's the night, the last few minutes before sleep. Guard it, use it, make it sacred, because whatever you plant there doesn't just shape your dreams, it shapes your destiny. We've all had nights where we climb into bed with a heavy mind. Maybe you're replaying an argument, stressing about money, worrying about the future, or beating yourself up for something you didn't do. You turn off the light, but your brain refuses to shut down, and the next morning, instead of waking up refreshed, you wake up already tired, already stressed, already behind. That's not just coincidence. That's the danger of negative thoughts. Here's the brutal truth. Your mind doesn't care if a thought is helpful or harmful. It doesn't ask, is this good for me? It simply takes what you give it and multiplies it in the dark. The subconscious never sleeps. And if you go to bed with fear, doubt, or anger, those emotions don't fade overnight. They grow roots. You wake up living in the exact same state you fell asleep in, sometimes even worse. The Stoics warned about this. They believed your inner life is more important than anything external because your thoughts become your reality. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." If you spend your nights feeding your mind negativity, don't be surprised when your mornings are filled with heaviness. Negativity doesn't vanish. It compounds. Think about it like this. When you go to sleep, your subconscious is like an open field. Whatever seeds you plant before bed, whether it's gratitude or resentment, peace or worry, those seeds get watered all night long. If you plant weeds of negativity, they'll be waiting for you in the morning, stronger than before. And if you repeat this cycle night after night, you're not just having bad days, you're programming a bad life. Now, some people think it's just thoughts. They don't mean anything. But neuroscience proves otherwise. The brain rewires itself based on repetition. This is called neuroplasticity. When you replay negative thoughts over and over, you strengthen the neural pathways that make those thoughts automatic. In other words, every time you go to bed with fear or self-doubt, you're carving those beliefs deeper into your brain. You're making them part of who you are. And here's the trap. Negative thoughts feel powerful at night because you're vulnerable. The distractions of the day are gone. The world is quiet, and suddenly you're left alone with yourself. If you don't control that silence, your fears will fill it. You'll lie in bed rehearsing worst-case scenarios, reliving mistakes, or predicting failure. And the subconscious doesn't argue. It just records. The next day you live according to that script. The danger is not just in the thoughts themselves, but in the story they build. One negative thought becomes a chain of others. I'm not good enough. I'll never change. Nothing works out for me. Soon, you're not just having negative thoughts. You're living under a negative identity, and identities are much harder to break than passing emotions. But here's the good news. If negativity compounds, so does positivity. Just like weeds spread if left unchecked, flowers grow if you plant them intentionally. You don't have to let your nights be ruled by toxic thoughts. You can take back control by deciding what to feed your mind before bed. Affirmations, gratitude, visualization. These aren't gimmicks. They're the antidote to negativity. They're how you rewrite the script before your subconscious runs with it. The Stoics practiced this kind of mental discipline every night. They reflected on their actions, but they didn't dwell in regret. They sought lessons, not self-punishment. They ended their day by aligning with their values, not with their fears. You can do the same. Instead of replaying what went wrong, replay what you learned. Instead of focusing on what's missing, focus on what you still have. Instead of affirming weakness, affirm strength. So, let me ask you, what do you hand your mind at night? Are you handing it poison or medicine? Because make no mistake, it will take whatever you give it and magnify it while you sleep. That's the fourth truth. Negative thoughts are not harmless. They are seeds that grow in the dark, shaping your mornings, your identity, and your destiny. If you don't guard your mind before bed, you're not just losing sleep, you're losing your future. A lot of people roll their eyes when they hear the word affirmations. They think it's just cheesy self-help talk, repeating empty phrases in front of a mirror, hoping life magically changes. But here's the truth. Most people miss. Affirmations are not wishes. They are commands. And your subconscious, which never sleeps, takes those commands seriously. Think of it like this. Your mind is a computer, and your subconscious is the operating system. Whatever you repeat with emotion, especially right before sleep, is like typing code straight into that system. Say, I'm capable, and your subconscious accepts it. Say, I'm weak, I can't do this, and it accepts that too. The subconscious doesn't argue, it doesn't judge, it just executes. And over time, those commands shape your beliefs, your actions, and your identity. The Stoics may not have used the word affirmations, but they lived the principle. Epictetus reminded his students to constantly rehearse truths that aligned with virtue. First, say to yourself what you would be, then do what you must do. That's an affirmation. It's not magic. It's aligning your words with the identity you want to embody, so your actions follow naturally. Now, here's where it gets powerful. Affirmations work best at night. Why? Because your conscious mind, the part that analyzes, doubts, and argues, is shutting down. Your subconscious is wide open like fertile soil waiting for seeds. Whatever you tell yourself in those last minutes before sleep will sink deep, repeating like an echo all night long. If you choose the right words, you're installing powerful commands. For example, imagine going to bed every night saying, I'm disciplined, I'm focused, I'm in control. At first, it might feel fake. You might not fully believe it yet, but your subconscious doesn't care if you believe. It just records. And the more you repeat it, the more natural it becomes. After weeks, those words stop sounding like affirmations and start sounding like facts. And when your subconscious accepts something as fact, your behavior changes to match. The opposite is also true. Negative self-talk is just toxic affirmations. I can't change. I'm stuck. Nothing works out for me. Those are commands, too. And if you repeat them often enough, your subconscious obeys. That's why so many people feel trapped. They've been affirming their own limitations without even realizing it. This is why you can't afford to dismiss affirmations as silly. The truth is, you're already affirming something every day. Every complaint, every doubt, every insult you throw at yourself is an affirmation. The only question is, are you affirming weakness or are you affirming strength? Science backs this up too. Studies on neuroplasticity show that the brain adapts to repeated thoughts and images. Affirmations aren't magic. Their repetition and repetition rewires your brain. Combine that with the emotional intensity of nighttime, and you have one of the most powerful tools for reprogramming your identity. But here's the key. Affirmations must be intentional, not random. Don't just say vague phrases like, I'm happy. Be specific and powerful. I'm moving forward. I'm in control of my choices. I'm building my best self. The more concrete and emotional the affirmation, the stronger the command. The Stoics would challenge us here. Don't just say the words, live them. Affirmations are the commands, but your actions are the proof. Together, they build a new identity that no one can shake. So tonight, before you close your eyes, remember this. You're giving your subconscious direct instructions. You can either hand it poison, words of fear and doubt, or you can hand it commands of power, discipline, and purpose. Your subconscious won't argue. It will simply obey. That's the fifth truth. Affirmations are not empty words. They are commands. And when you repeat the right ones every night, you're not just talking. You're programming your future. Here's the mistake most people make. They treat bedtime like a throwaway moment. They drag their tired body into bed, scroll through their phone until their eyes burn or pass out with the TV still buzzing in the background. No intention, no awareness, no discipline. And then they wonder why they wake up drained, anxious, or unfocused. The truth is, they wasted one of the most powerful opportunities they had, the last few minutes before sleep. If you really want to change your life, you have to start treating those moments as sacred. Nighttime reprogramming shouldn't be an accident. It should be a ritual, a deliberate, consistent practice that turns every night into a training ground for your subconscious. Think of it like this. The night is a doorway. You can stumble through it half asleep, carrying the baggage of the day, or you can walk through it with intention, planting the seeds of who you want to become. The Stoics believed in rituals for a reason. They understood that structure creates freedom. Seneca wrote that each evening should be used to examine the day and prepare the mind for tomorrow. That wasn't superstition. It was strategy. So what does a nighttime ritual look like? It doesn't have to be complicated. 5 or 10 minutes is enough. Start by shutting down the noise. Turn off the screens. Put the phone away. Let the world go quiet. Then breathe. Slow your body down. Signal to your mind that it's time to release the chaos of the day. After that, feed your subconscious something intentional. Affirmations, gratitude, visualization. Tell yourself, I am in control. I am disciplined. I am growing stronger every day. Or picture yourself walking confidently into the life you want, feeling it as if it's already true. The power of a ritual is repetition. Do it once. It feels nice. Do it twice. You notice a shift. Do it every night, and it becomes a discipline. And discipline is what rewires you. The brain responds to patterns. The subconscious thrives on repetition. The more often you perform your nighttime ritual, the deeper the commands go until they stop being practices and start being your identity. Compare that to how most people end their nights. They replay regrets. They drown in worry. They let random distractions shape their subconscious. That's still a ritual, just a destructive one. The difference is they didn't choose it. It became automatic. And automatic habits always win. If you want to break free, you have to create a better ritual, one that serves your growth instead of sabotaging it. And here's something important. A nighttime ritual isn't about perfection. Some nights you'll be exhausted. Some nights you'll feel unmotivated. That doesn't matter. What matters is showing up anyway. Even if you only whisper one affirmation, even if you just take 2 deep breaths with intention, even if you only visualize for a minute, the point is to send a clear message to your subconscious. I'm in charge. I choose what goes in. I decide who I'll be tomorrow. The Stoics believed freedom came from mastery of the self, and mastery of the self comes from rituals, repeated actions that anchor your mind to what matters most. Nighttime reprogramming is exactly that. It's an anchor. It's a way of saying, I will not let this day define me. I will define tomorrow by what I choose to plant tonight. So don't treat bedtime like an afterthought. Treat it like a ceremony, a small, quiet ceremony where you prepare your soul for the day ahead. Because every night you either reinforce the old patterns that keep you stuck or you install the new patterns that pull you forward. That choice is yours every single evening. That's the 6th truth. Nighttime reprogramming should not be random. It should be a ritual, a sacred discipline that transforms the most ordinary moment falling asleep into the most powerful tool for building the life you want. Every single one of us carries a story inside, a story about who we are, what we deserve, and what's possible for us. Some of those stories are empowering, but many are not. Many of them were written for us long before we were old enough to choose. Maybe a teacher told you that you weren't smart enough. Maybe your parents made you feel like you'd never measure up. Maybe life knocked you down so many times that you started to believe you were meant to stay small, and now, without even realizing it, you're still living by that old script. Here's the problem. The subconscious doesn't know the difference between a story you chose and a story that was forced on you. If you repeat it enough, if you think it enough, your subconscious accepts it as law. I'm not enough. I always fail. I'll never change. These phrases, said often enough, become chains. They don't just limit what you do, they limit who you believe you are. The Stoics warned us about this trap. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." In other words, it's not reality that holds you back. It's the story you tell yourself about reality. And if that story is filled with limitation, then your life will shrink to fit it. But here's the good news. Stories can be rewritten. And the best time to rewrite them is at night, right before sleep. Why? Because that's when the old story is most vulnerable, in that quiet space. When your conscious defenses fade, your subconscious is listening. And whatever you tell it becomes the new script it starts to rehearse. Think about the power of this. If you've lived for years under the story, "I'm not good enough," imagine ending every night with a new line, "I am capable, I am building, I am growing stronger." At first it feels fake. The old story fights back, but repetition is stronger than doubt. Night after night, the new story sinks deeper. Slowly, the subconscious begins to replace the old script with the new one. And when your story changes, your identity changes. And when your identity changes, your entire life changes. This is how people break cycles, not by one dramatic event, but by rewriting their inner story, one night at a time. The limiting beliefs that were planted in childhood can be uprooted. The old voices can be silenced. The past doesn't have to keep directing the future, but only if you choose to step in and take control of the narrative. Here's a practical example. Let's say you've been carrying the story, "I always give up." That thought has shaped your actions for years. Now, instead of letting that be the last thing you tell yourself, you replace it with, "I finish what I start. I am disciplined. I keep my promises." You repeat it every night before sleep, even when you don't believe it yet. And slowly your subconscious accepts the new command. The next time you face a challenge, that new script kicks in automatically. Instead of quitting, you push through. That's not magic. That's reprogramming. And here's the truth. Your story is either your prison or your freedom. If you let it, it will chain you to old versions of yourself forever. But if you rewrite it, it becomes your path to transformation. The Stoics believe that while we cannot control external events, we always control the story we tell ourselves about them, and that story determines everything. So tonight before you sleep, ask yourself, what story am I still living by? Whose voice am I still obeying? And most importantly, what new story do I want to write? Because the moment you choose to rewrite it, your subconscious will listen. It always listens, and tomorrow it will begin to act on the script you gave it tonight. That's the seventh truth. You are not trapped in the limiting story you inherited. You can break it. You can rewrite it. And the best time to do it is in the silence of the night, when your mind is open and ready to receive a new narrative, one that sets you free. Here's something incredible about the human brain. It's not fixed. It's not stuck in stone. For years, people believed that once you reached adulthood, your brain was basically locked in place, your habits, your personality, your abilities, all set forever. But science has proven that's not true. The brain has something called neuroplasticity, the ability to change, to rewire, to reshape itself based on what you repeatedly think, feel, and imagine. And that means you're never really stuck. Your mind is like clay. It is marked by every thought, picture, and feeling that goes through it. If you think the same things over and over, they will become deep lines in your brain that you can't stop following. That's why habits, good and bad, feel so strong. You can't just pick them. They're built into your wiring as designs. There is good news, though. Patterns like those can be changed because neurons are plastic. One of the best times to do it is at night. Why? For this reason, the mind is most open right before bed. As your conscious mind starts to calm down, your brain waves slow down. This lets your emotions and imagination have a bigger effect. During those times, what you think, feel, or imagine isn't just a thought. It changes the way your brain works. You can think of it as telling your brain, "This is who I am now. These are the plans I have for the future." It's kind of like working out your mind. Your brain will learn to feel fear, worry, and doubt automatically if you keep playing those states over and over. It's getting stronger, the muscles of worry and fear. But if you think about strength, discipline, and thanks right before bed, you're training the wrong pathways. You are changing the structure of your brain, to make confidence, focus, and toughness more natural. Even though the Stoics didn't use the word neuroplasticity, they knew what it meant. Marcus Aurelius told himself every day to be brave, fair, and in control of himself. Why keep saying the same things? Because repeat changes who we are. That's because a thought gets stronger the more you think about it. That's how neuroplasticity works. 2,000 years before scientists named it. This is an example. Let's say you've believed it for years. I don't follow rules. Speaking or thinking it over and over again makes that road stronger. Instead, pretend for 5 minutes every night that you wake up early, work out hard, and finish your work with focus. It makes you feel strong and proud, like it's already true. Do that every night, and your brain will start to change over time. The old path of "I'm not disciplined" gets weaker as the new path of "I am disciplined" gets stronger. In the end, it turns into the default. That isn't just wishful thought. That is science. What you feed the brain, it will do. And if you know how to use it right, neuroplasticity is your best friend. But there's a catch. It works both ways. You're still rewiring your brain, but it's going in the wrong way if you let negativity, fear, or self-doubt take over your nights. Neuroplasticity doesn't care if the thoughts you have are good or bad. What you repeat only gets stronger. That's why it's so dangerous to complain, watch harmful media, or be hard on yourself before bed. You're giving your brain plans for a less strong version of yourself. That being said, what plans are you giving your brain? Are you letting old habits and limiting ideas become permanent ways of doing things? Or are you using neuroplasticity to make new ones that will help you get stronger, more resilient, and grow? The Stoics would tell you to give this some thought. Watch your thoughts, because they make you who you are, they would say. Keep an eye on your character. It determines your fate. The only thing that modern science adds is your brain can change whenever you tell it to. That is the 8th truth. Neuroplasticity will help you. You have the power to change your brain, your personality, and the person you want to become every night before you go to sleep. And the more you do it, the more normal it feels, until you wake up one day and realize that your brain has been rebuilt to make you stronger, being consistent over feelings. Here is a big mistake that many people make. They wait until they want to do it. It's like, I'll do my affirmations when I feel like it. When I get the urge, I'll imagine, when the time is right, I'll change the way my mind works. This happens because their thoughts change quickly, so they skip days, lose steam, and finally give up. That's why lots of people don't change. They don't act because they don't know any better, but because they act whenever they feel like it. But the truth is easy to see. Change doesn't come from how you feel. It comes from always doing it. This was something that only the Stoics knew too well. Epictetus told his students that discipline lasts longer than feelings, so they shouldn't let their moods decide what they do. Marcus Aurelius told himself every day that he had to get up and do his job, even when his body hurt. Because success isn't built on being comfortable. It comes from doing it over and over again. Take a look at this. Your health will suffer if you only brush your teeth when you feel like it. Your job will fall apart if you only work when you feel like it. Your body will never get bigger if you only work out when you feel like it. Feelings aren't always accurate. Discipline works every time. This is also true for reprogramming your thoughts before you go to sleep. Always, being consistent is better than being inspired. Over and over, practice changes the way the brain works. To explain, learning works like this. No amount of words will change you in one night. Visualization won't change years of limiting ideas in one night. The slow drip that happens night after night changes who you are. At first you don't notice the difference. Even though it doesn't seem like it, your mind is changing, adapting, and getting stronger. After a few weeks or months, the change is clear. You have a different view. You do different things. You are not like everyone else. Now here's the catch. Some first nights don't seem to have a point. You say a promise in your ear. You try to picture it, but nothing comes up. Most people give up at that point. What they say is, "This isn't working." You wouldn't plant seeds and then dig them up the next morning because you haven't seen a tree yet. It takes time to grow, which means you have to be steady, no matter how you feel for it to happen. Consistency is also powerful because it builds trust with yourself. When you show up every night, even when you're tired, even when you don't feel like it, you prove to yourself that your word matters. You're no longer a prisoner of moods. You're a master of discipline. And that builds self-respect, the kind that can't be shaken by outside circumstances. The Stoics would call this freedom because real freedom isn't doing whatever you feel like. It's doing what's right, regardless of how you feel. Feelings are like weather. They change constantly. But consistency is like the sun. It rises every day, steady, dependable, unshaken. That's how you have to approach reprogramming your mind. Not as a hobby you do when the mood is right, but as a discipline you do because it shapes who you're becoming. So here's the challenge. Stop asking yourself, "Do I feel like it tonight?" The answer doesn't matter. Instead ask, "Who am I becoming through this practice?" Then show up. Even if it's just for 2 minutes, even if it's one affirmation, even if it's one deep breath of intention, because the power isn't in the size of the action, it's in the consistency of it. That's the ninth truth. Feelings can't be trusted, but consistency can. Reprogramming your mind is not about waiting for magic. It's about showing up night after night, no matter what, until the change becomes permanent. Because in the end, greatness doesn't belong to the most inspired. It belongs to the most consistent, the silent choice. Every night before you close your eyes, you face a choice. It doesn't make noise. No one sees it. No one applauds it. But it's there, silent, powerful, and life-shaping. That choice is this. Will you use the final minutes of your day to reinforce your limitations, or will you use them to program your greatness? The truth is, the decision you make in that quiet moment doesn't just affect your sleep, it affects your future. Because your subconscious never sleeps. It will spend the next 6 to 8 hours working on whatever you gave it. If you fall asleep with anger, regret, or self-doubt, your mind multiplies it through the night. You wake up with the weight of yesterday still on your shoulders. But if you fall asleep with intention, gratitude, and vision, your subconscious spends the night building a stronger version of you. The Stoics understood this. They practiced nightly reflection not as a luxury, but as a discipline. Seneca advised reviewing the day each evening, asking, "What weakness did I overcome? What progress did I make?" This wasn't just philosophy. It was strategy, because he knew that every night was a chance to reset, to choose again, to point the mind toward virtue instead of vice. But here's what most people don't realize. That choice is silent. No one will cheer you for putting your phone down instead of scrolling. No one will clap when you whisper affirmations instead of replaying old mistakes. No one will congratulate you for closing your eyes with gratitude instead of fear. It's a private decision, invisible to the world, but heavy with consequences. And that's why so many people miss it. They think change happens in big dramatic moments. They want a breakthrough, a lightning strike, a life-changing event. But real change happens in the small, silent choices you make every day. The choice to act with discipline instead of impulse. The choice to feed your mind strength instead of weakness. The choice to plant seeds of vision instead of weeds of doubt. Think of it like water dripping on stone. One drop doesn't matter, but drop after drop, night after night, it reshapes the rock completely. Your subconscious works the same way. Every night your choice, though silent, drips into it. Over time, it carves new patterns, new beliefs, a new identity. And one day, you wake up realizing you are not the same person you were months ago. You didn't transform in one loud moment. You transformed in silence. This is what makes the silent choice so powerful. It's always available. No matter how chaotic your day was, no matter how many mistakes you made, no matter how heavy life feels, you still have those final minutes. You still have the power to decide what you'll hand your subconscious tonight. That's the ultimate reset button, and most people never use it. So ask yourself, what will you choose tonight? To replay your pain or to reprogram your power? To rehearse your fears or to affirm your strength? To fall asleep as a prisoner of the past or to drift off as the architect of your future? That's the 10th truth. Every night you face a silent choice. And though no one sees it, no one hears it, and no one claps for it, that choice shapes your destiny. Because while the world sleeps, your mind is working, and it will build tomorrow based on the script you gave it tonight. Most people think the secret to better sleep is simply more sleep. They say, if I could just get 8 or 9 hours, I'd wake up refreshed. If I could just sleep in, I'd feel better. But you know as well as I do, that's not always true. There are nights when you sleep long hours and still wake up heavy, tired, or restless. And there are nights when you sleep less, but wake up sharper, calmer, and more energized. The difference isn't the number of hours. The difference is the quality of your mind before you rest. Sleep is not just physical recovery, it's mental processing. Your subconscious doesn't shut down. It keeps working, organizing your memories, storing emotions, and replaying whatever you fed it before bed. If you went to sleep with stress, anger, or negativity, your brain marinated in that all night. You might have slept 8 hours, but it was 8 hours of your subconscious rehearsing the wrong script. That's why you woke up drained. The Stoics understood this even without neuroscience. Seneca wrote about the importance of preparing the mind for rest, saying that peace of mind was the key to real rest. He didn't mean luxury or comfort. He meant mental clarity. Going to bed with a quiet, disciplined mind was more restorative than any number of hours spent tossing in emotional chaos. Think about it. If you eat junk food all day, going to bed earlier won't make you healthier. In the same way, if you feed your mind junk thoughts all night, more hours won't make you stronger. The quality of your rest comes from the quality of your inner state. And that inner state is completely in your control. Here's where it gets practical. If you want better sleep, you don't necessarily need to add more hours. You need to change how you enter sleep. That means creating a mental ritual, a moment of stillness where you choose what thoughts and emotions will guide your subconscious through the night. Instead of scrolling endlessly, shut it down. Instead of replaying regrets, focus on gratitude. Instead of worrying about tomorrow, visualize strength and clarity. Even 5 minutes of this intentional practice can transform the quality of your sleep. Science backs this up. Studies show that people who practice gratitude or visualization before bed not only sleep better, but also wake up with more focus and optimism. Why? Because their subconscious spent the night reinforcing empowering thoughts instead of destructive ones, their rest wasn't just longer, it was deeper. And here's the paradox. Sometimes less sleep with a clear mind is better than more sleep with a cluttered one. You can sleep 10 hours with anxiety and still wake up tired. Or you can sleep 6 hours after feeding your subconscious strength and wake up ready to conquer the day. Quality beats quantity every single time. The Stoics would challenge you to treat bedtime like entering a temple. Not a place for distraction or noise, but a place for order and discipline. Your bed becomes the altar where you decide what to hand your subconscious, and the offering you give it, fear or strength, doubt or vision, will decide how you wake up. So stop obsessing over the number of hours. Instead, ask, what am I feeding my mind before I close my eyes? Am I preparing it for peace or for chaos? Because that's what determines whether your sleep restores you or drains you. That's the 11th truth. Better sleep isn't more sleep, it's higher quality sleep. And quality comes from preparing your mind like a sacred space before you rest. Protect that moment, and you'll discover that the true power of sleep isn't in its length, but in its depth. At the end of the day, there's one truth no one can escape. Your mind is your own sovereign territory. No one else lives there. No one else can manage it for you. People can influence you, distract you, try to shape your beliefs. But at night, when you lay your head on the pillow, you're the only one who decides what your subconscious will carry into tomorrow. This is both a responsibility and a gift. Responsibility, because you can't blame anyone else for what you choose to feed your mind, and a gift, because it means you always hold the power to change. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery doesn't begin with the body, the job, or the relationships. It begins with the mind. And your mind is the one domain where you are always emperor. The problem is most people surrender their territory without even realizing it. They let social media news and other people's opinions flood their thoughts. They let old voices from childhood, parents, teachers, critics, still echo in their head as if they're law. They hand over their mental sovereignty to everyone but themselves, and every night, instead of programming their mind with vision and strength, they let outside noise dictate their inner world. But the truth is this: no one can climb into your subconscious without your permission. They can speak, they can shout, they can influence, but only you decide which voices stay. Only you choose whether to replay their words or silence them. And the moment you realize that, you take back control of your life. Think about it like a fortress. Your mind is the castle, your subconscious the treasure inside. Every night you stand at the gate. You can either let invaders walk right in, fear, anger, doubt, or you can guard it fiercely, letting in only what strengthens and protects you. No one else can stand at that gate for you. It's your job, your responsibility, your sovereignty. The Stoics would remind you that life is full of things outside your control: health, wealth, reputation, even the people around you. But the one thing always within your control is your mind. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the essence of sovereignty. And nowhere is this more true than at night, in those last moments before sleep, when you decide what your mind will carry into tomorrow. Here's the empowering part. Sovereignty means freedom. No one can force you to replay negativity. No one can make you affirm weakness. No one can stop you from planting seeds of greatness. Every night, the choice is yours alone. You hold the pen, you write the script, and your subconscious will obey. Of course, with freedom comes weight, because if you don't take charge, someone else will. If you don't guard your mind, the world will gladly fill it with noise, distraction, and fear. Sovereignty is not automatic. It must be claimed. And once you claim it, you must defend it every night, like sacred ground. So the question is, how are you ruling your territory? Are you a careless king letting invaders run wild through your gates? Or are you a disciplined ruler, protecting your land, planting seeds of strength, vision, and discipline in your subconscious? That's the 12th truth. Your mind is sovereign territory. No one else can do the inner work for you. No one else can reprogram you. No one else can decide what you think before you sleep. That is your responsibility, and it is also your greatest freedom. Because the moment you accept full ownership of your mind, you stop being a victim of circumstance, and you start being the architect of your destiny. So here's what we've discovered. Your nights aren't just for rest. Therefore, reprogramming every single evening before you close your eyes, you hold the most powerful tool for transformation. The thoughts, feelings, and images you choose to feed your subconscious. The Stoics understood this long before science gave it a name. They knew the mind never sleeps. They knew the subconscious accepts everything you give it. They knew those final minutes before bed are the golden doorway where you can either plant weeds of fear or seeds of strength. They warned us about the danger of negative thoughts, because what you repeat becomes your reality. But they also knew the opposite is true. Affirmations are commands, and when you use them intentionally, you reprogram yourself. That's why reprogramming at night should be a ritual, not an accident. Because it's at night that you can break the old limiting story you've been living under. And with the power of neuroplasticity, your brain will adapt to whatever you repeat with intensity. But it only works if you're consistent night after night, whether you feel like it or not. Because each evening you face that silent choice. Reinforce your limitations or install your greatness. And remember, better sleep isn't about more hours. It's about quality. A mind prepared with gratitude, focus, and vision will rest deeper than one filled with chaos. Because at the end of the day, your mind is sovereign territory. No one else can rule it for you. The thoughts you choose before sleep are your responsibility, your freedom, your crown. So tonight, when the world goes quiet, don't just collapse into bed. Take ownership. Guard your mind. Plant seeds of power, not weakness. Because what you do in those last 5 minutes will echo through the next day and eventually through your entire life. The night is not just the end, it's the beginning. That's how identity gets reinforced. If you go to bed every night thinking, I'm falling behind, or I'm not enough, that's not just a mood. It becomes a filter through which your brain starts to process everything, and before long, those thoughts aren't just ideas. They become assumptions, and assumptions turn into identity. Aristotle believed that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. He was talking about behavior, but it applies even more deeply to the internal world. What you repeatedly think, especially when your guard is down, becomes who you are without thinking. That's identity. It's not just what you do when the spotlight is on. It's what your mind rehearses in the quiet. It's the story you fall asleep to and the one that wakes up with you the next day. And that's the problem. Most people never question those stories. They never realize that the voice in their head at night isn't their truth. It's their programming. It's their past echoing back at them. It's the tone of a critical parent, a bitter teacher, a lost relationship, a failure that left a scar. And if you don't interrupt that voice, if you don't offer your mind a new pattern to follow, it will keep building your identity from old wounds. That's why nighttime isn't just rest, it's rehearsal. Your subconscious replays what it knows, what it hears most often, what it assumes must matter. And if you're not careful, you'll end up living a life that isn't even yours. One shaped by insecurity instead of clarity, by survival instead of purpose. That's not who you really are. That's who you became when you stopped paying attention. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." That doesn't mean you need to overanalyze every thought, but it does mean you need to be intentional about what you let repeat, especially at night. Because repetition is how identity is formed, and nighttime is when repetition is most powerful. This is why rituals matter. Not grand ones, simple ones. Reading something meaningful, reflecting on a Stoic principle, whispering a truth you want to believe, even if you don't fully feel it. Yet I am not my past. I have the power to choose again. Tomorrow is not yesterday. These aren't magical phrases. They're anchors. They pull you toward a new identity, one thought at a time. Think of your subconscious like a garden. Every thought before bed is a seed. You don't see the roots forming, but you wake up with new habits, new reactions, new expectations. That's how identity works. It's not forced into place. It grows into place slowly, repeatedly, quietly, and it starts when you're not awake. So, if you've been waking up feeling off, out of alignment, disconnected, discouraged, it's not because you're weak. It's because your identity has been hijacked by unchecked thoughts. You're not broken. You're just rehearsing the wrong script. And the good news is it's not permanent. The brain is plastic. The mind is flexible. Identity can be reformed, but not through noise, not through force, through presence, through choice, through consistent inner work that starts not when the alarm goes off, but when the lights go out. So tonight, as you lay down and your conscious mind begins to drift, remember this. Who you become is shaped less by what you try to do and more by what you allow yourself to believe. The beliefs that are most powerful are the ones you don't question. So, choose carefully. Choose with care, because identity is not who you say you are. It's what your subconscious believes when you're asleep. And that belief is built night after night by the thoughts you let in before the world goes quiet. Most people fall asleep with noise, scrolling background shows, cluttered conversations, the endless hum of unresolved worries. It feels normal, harmless even. But that noise doesn't disappear when you close your eyes. It settles in. It leaks into your dreams. It shapes how you feel when you wake up. What's overlooked is that the mind doesn't need more distraction to find peace. It needs clarity. And clarity doesn't come from noise. It comes from depth, from stillness, from philosophy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you fall asleep to chaos, your soul learns chaos. If you fall asleep to wisdom, your soul learns order." That's not poetic exaggeration. That's how neuroplasticity works. Your brain is always listening, always learning, especially when it's winding down. That's why what you feed it in the final hour before sleep matters more than what you do in the first hour after you wake. We've made the mistake of thinking sleep is just recovery for the body, but it's more than that. It's rehearsal for the mind. The thoughts you carry into sleep sink deeper than the ones you repeat during the day, At night, your conscious resistance fades, and whatever thoughts are present, the mind absorbs without a fight. That's why people who fall asleep to worry wake up anxious. That's why those who fall asleep angry wake up already on edge. What you go to bed with, you wake up in. So what if you replace the noise with something stronger, something steadier? What if instead of a random reel or anxious loop, you let Epictetus or Seneca or Aurelius speak to you before bed? Not to impress you, but to prepare you, because that's what philosophy really is. Not a subject, not a theory, a training ground, a mirror, a filter for your thoughts. Philosophy isn't about being smart, it's about being stable. The Stoics weren't obsessed with abstract ideas. They were obsessed with control, not of the outside world, but of the self. They knew that life would throw chaos at you, but they also knew that if your inner world was trained to stay anchored, chaos wouldn't matter. That's why they wrote. That's why they reflected. That's why they asked the hardest questions in the quiet hours, so they could remain unmoved. When the storm came, Plato believed that the part of the soul which desires truth and wisdom must rule. But in most people, that part of the soul is buried under layers of entertainment, bitterness, and worry. And the only way to bring it back to the surface is by feeding it consistently, not with junk, but with truth, with depth, with ideas that challenge you instead of numb you. This is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming unshakable. When you end your day with philosophy, you're not trying to be perfect. You're reminding yourself of what you value. You're choosing perspective. You're placing your attention where it serves you instead of where it drains you. And that choice, made consistently, becomes a mindset. That mindset becomes a habit, and that habit forms the foundation of how you experience life itself. Think about this. If someone told you that every night you had the chance to train your mind to be calmer, more focused, more resilient, just by what you listen to or reflect on before bed, wouldn't you take that seriously? Because that's the truth. You don't need more apps. You don't need more hacks. You need fewer distractions and more wisdom. You need less noise and more nourishment. Aristotle once said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." That's what philosophy teaches you, to entertain ideas that stretch you, to explore thoughts without being consumed by them, to pause instead of react, to reflect instead of spiral. When you end your day with these kinds of thoughts, your mind doesn't just rest, it resets, and that reset changes everything. You begin to notice the noise around you during the day. You start to reject what doesn't serve your peace. You stop feeding your anxiety out of habit, not because someone told you to, but because your inner world has changed. That change didn't come from effort. It came from attention, from what you gave your mind at the end of the day. It's subtle, but it's powerful. The way you think right before bed writes the code for how you live when you wake. So feed your mind what it needs, not what it craves. Replace gossip with wisdom. Replace judgment with clarity. Replace scrolling with stillness. Replace noise with philosophy. And you'll stop waking up tired and start waking up strong. Because in the end, the strongest minds aren't built in daylight. They're shaped in darkness, in silence, in reflection when no one's watching. And if you learn to master that space, if you learn to feed it with strength, you'll carry that strength with you into everything you do. The subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't question your beliefs. It doesn't analyze what's helpful or harmful. It doesn't have the luxury of discernment the way your conscious mind does. It simply takes in what you give it, repeatedly, consistently, and without filter. That's why it's so powerful, and why it's also so dangerous if left unattended. It becomes what you feed it. That's not a metaphor. That's how it functions. When Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate," he wasn't being poetic. He was describing the exact mechanism of how people sabotage their own peace without realizing it. The subconscious stores every experience, every emotion, every repeated thought. But more importantly, it turns those thoughts into default responses, into emotional reactions, into internal narratives that run in the background of your life. This is why a person who constantly worries doesn't need a reason to worry. The subconscious has already learned that worry is the baseline, so it builds a reality that justifies it. That person wakes up tense, reacts quickly, and doubts themselves, not because of what's happening around them, but because of what's been rehearsed within them over and over again, without interruption. Your mind is listening long after you've stopped paying attention. And at night, when your conscious guard is lowered, when the distractions fall away, that's when the subconscious is most active. That's when it starts sorting, integrating, reinforcing. But if what you've given it all day is noise, conflict, fear, or anger, then that's what it uses to build your internal world. It doesn't push back. It doesn't protect you. It simply absorbs. And what's absorbed becomes belief. It becomes identity. That's how someone can slowly begin to believe they're not enough, even if no one ever told them that directly. A look, a comment, a mistake, if rehearsed enough, can become a foundational belief about the self. The subconscious doesn't ask for evidence. It doesn't care about truth. It cares about repetition. That's why intention is everything. If you don't choose what your mind focuses on, your environment will choose for you, and your subconscious will build from that. It will take the fear you felt while scrolling the news, the comparison you felt on social media, the shame from a conversation earlier, and it will integrate all of it as if it's true. Not because it wants to, but because you didn't give it anything better. You can't expect to feel calm when your subconscious has been trained in chaos. You can't expect confidence if your nightly routine is built around self-judgment. And you can't expect to wake up strong if your mind went to sleep full of confusion. Aristotle taught that we are what we repeatedly do. But it's deeper than doing. We are what we repeatedly believe. And belief is born in the subconscious. Think about how children absorb the world. They don't filter their experiences. They believe what they hear. They absorb tone, mood, meaning, even when they can't put it into words. Adults aren't much different. The subconscious is always listening. Even when you're not aware of it, especially in silence, especially in solitude, especially at night. That's why what you consume, what you reflect on, what you listen to, what you say to yourself before bed carries so much weight. And that's also where the power lies. Because if you can shape your subconscious through repetition, then you can shape your reality the same way. You don't need a dramatic moment of change. You need consistent, deliberate repetition of better thoughts, of wiser ideas, of words that ground you instead of rattle you. The subconscious doesn't discriminate. That's the bad news and the good news. It means the damage can be done, but it also means it can be undone. The Stoics didn't write because they had extra time. They wrote because they understood the human tendency to drift. They knew the subconscious needed to be trained not once but daily. They reinforced the same principles over and over again. You have power over your mind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. He didn't write that once and move on. He returned to it again and again because he knew that the mind forgets and the subconscious needs reminders. You don't need a complete overhaul. You need conscious input. One idea repeated enough times becomes a belief. One truth quietly reinforced every night becomes a worldview. The subconscious doesn't care if it comes from your deepest wisdom or your worst insecurity. It will turn it into reality either way. That's why replacing noise with strength isn't just a nice idea. It's survival. It's strategy. It's how you build a foundation that can't be shaken by daily stress or emotional storms, because your reactions, your moods, your confidence, it's all rooted in what your subconscious has come to accept as truth. The mind can't serve two masters. If you feed it fear all day and try to meditate for 5 minutes at night, guess which one it will believe? If you fill it with complaints, with judgment, with unresolved emotion, and expect peace, it won't come. Not because you don't deserve peace, but because peace was never given the space to take root. The subconscious will follow the stronger voice, and the stronger voice is always the one you repeat. So give it a better voice. Feed it clarity. Give it stillness. Offer it a mindset rooted in reason, discipline, and truth. Not just for show, but because it matters. Because the thoughts you speak to yourself in the dark will echo through every decision you make in the light. And if you take that seriously, if you guide your subconscious instead of letting it wander, you'll begin to see the difference. Not immediately, but inevitably. There is no secret to transformation. There is no hack. There's just repetition. There's just what you allow your mind to believe when you're not paying attention. That's what shapes everything. The subconscious doesn't judge, it just absorbs. So be careful what you give it, and be even more intentional about what you repeat, because that's not just the story you're telling yourself, it's the life you're building. When you go to bed in conflict, you don't leave the war behind. You carry it into your dreams, into your body, into the rhythm of your breath. You may think sleep will give you peace, but it doesn't. Not when your nervous system is still alert, your heart still guarded, your mind still spinning over what was said, what should have been said, and what you wish you could take back. The body rests, but the mind continues the argument in silence. And that silent argument, it doesn't heal, it hardens. What begins as a small disagreement festers overnight into a story. And stories have power. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between what's happening now and what's being replayed mentally. So if you lie in bed revisiting a painful conversation, that pain embeds itself deeper, not just as memory, but as identity. You start seeing yourself through the lens of that moment, angry, betrayed, misunderstood, defensive, and the next morning you don't wake up fresh. You wake up with a mental hangover, still wearing the emotional residue of a night lived in tension. Plato once said, "There is no greater evil one can suffer than to hate reasonable discourse." But when we sleep in conflict, we reject reason without knowing it. We let the emotional brain take control and shut out the wiser part of ourselves, the one capable of reflection, forgiveness, understanding. And the more nights we spend that way, the more disconnected we become from that inner wisdom. People often believe time will fix emotional wounds, but time doesn't heal what is constantly reopened. And every time you mentally revisit that fight, that insult, that moment of misunderstanding, you rip the wound open again. You might not speak it out loud, but your body knows. Your breath shortens, your muscles tighten. Your sleep becomes shallow. You wake up tired, not because you didn't sleep, but because the conflict never stopped. Socrates believed that the unexamined life is not worth living. But what about the over-examined conflict? When you obsessively turn something over in your head, not to learn from it, but to relive it, what good does that do? It doesn't bring resolution. It doesn't create clarity. It only traps you in a loop. And your subconscious, quiet and obedient, builds that loop into a pattern. The danger here isn't just in feeling bad. It's in training your mind to seek out more conflict. You begin to expect tension. You start seeing it where it isn't. You enter conversations already defensive, interpreting neutral actions as attacks. That's how conflict becomes not just something you experience, but something you carry with you into your relationships, into your work, into your view of yourself. Now, here's the truth. Resolution isn't always possible before bed. Sometimes the other person won't pick up the phone. Sometimes the situation is too fresh, too painful. But even if peace with them isn't available, peace with yourself is. That's the choice we often forget. You can't always end the argument, but you can end the grip it has on you. That doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means reminding yourself that the conflict is not your identity, that anger doesn't have to follow you to sleep, that your mind doesn't need to rehearse pain just because it's available. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And going to bed in conflict is a form of resistance. It's trying to outrun the discomfort instead of accepting it, processing it, and releasing what you can. A wise mind doesn't need everything solved right away. It just needs space. And that space begins the moment you choose to put the story down, even if temporarily, even if just for tonight, because every night is a chance to reset the emotional tone of your life. And if you consistently go to bed in conflict, then conflict becomes the emotional default of your days. That's the real danger. When inner tension becomes so normal that peace feels unfamiliar, you wake up ready to defend, not to connect. You live in anticipation of offense. You rehearse old arguments in your head and miss the present moment entirely. And worst of all, you forget what it feels like to rest deeply, not just physically, but emotionally. The Stoics believed that our peace depends not on external events, but on our response to them. Epictetus taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That lesson is never more important than at night, because how you go to sleep isn't just a reaction to your day, it's a rehearsal for tomorrow. It programs the emotional baseline your subconscious will follow. So if you want more clarity, more energy, more strength, the starting point isn't in the morning, it's at night. It's in that quiet decision to let go just enough so that you can rest, to breathe a little deeper, to choose silence over the last word, to remind yourself that your peace is worth more than winning an argument that no one is still having except you. You're not weak for choosing peace. You're not naive for stepping away from conflict. You're wise. You're training your mind to value what truly matters. Because the more nights you spend in stillness, the more days you'll wake up grounded. And that's not just emotional healing. That's psychological strength. That's the kind of transformation that doesn't announce itself, but it changes everything. When the world goes quiet and you're left alone with your thoughts, that's when real reflection begins. But for many people, that silence is quickly polluted by guilt, not growth, not insight, just shame disguised as thinking. We mistake overanalysis for wisdom and self-judgment for responsibility. But the truth is, guilt isn't clarity, it's noise. And until we learn to reflect without guilt, our self-reflection will always be colored by pain rather than understanding. There's a difference between holding yourself accountable and punishing yourself. One leads to growth, the other leads to paralysis. Yet so many of us confuse the two. We lie awake at night, replaying things we said, decisions we made, moments we wish we could change. We call it reflection, but really, it's rumination. We're not learning. We're looping. And that loop keeps us stuck in the very identity we're trying to outgrow. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Guilt operates in the unconscious. It shapes the lens through which we examine ourselves. It whispers, "You're not good enough," even when we're doing our best. And if we let that voice go unchecked, our self-reflection turns into self-attack. We become afraid to look honestly at ourselves because we know what's waiting. There isn't clarity, it's condemnation. But real reflection isn't about proving you're bad. It's about understanding where you were unconscious and deciding what you want to do with that awareness. It's not about tearing yourself down. It's about tuning into what you were blind to before. It's about catching your patterns with compassion, not a whip. Because change doesn't come from shame. It comes from truth, paired with grace. When you sit in quiet review of your day, the question isn't, "What did I mess up?" The question is, where was I unaware? Where was I reactive? Where did I ignore my values? That shift changes everything. It opens the door to responsibility without self-abuse, and it lets you move forward with power instead of dragging the past like a chain. Socrates said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." But he didn't say, "Shame yourself into becoming better." Self-inquiry was his path to wisdom, but it was also his path to freedom. To see clearly, we have to stop moralizing our mistakes, stop attaching our worth to every error. You made a choice with the awareness you had. Now you have more. That's growth. That's evolution. So why is guilt so addictive? Because it feels like action. It feels like penance, but it's hollow. It doesn't move energy. It just recycles it. It traps you in a version of yourself that you've already outgrown. And that trap is reinforced every night you go to bed mentally punishing yourself for being human. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." That's the spirit of honest reflection, not shame, but correction, not judgment, but openness to improvement. You look at yourself not to feel small, but to grow stronger. Night is a sacred time for this kind of review. Your distractions are down. The external world isn't screaming for your attention. You have a rare opportunity to face yourself with honesty, but that moment becomes toxic if guilt takes over the space. If instead of learning, you're labeling. If instead of evolving, you're hiding behind blame. So, how do you shift? Start by talking to yourself like someone you want to see win. Use language that opens you instead of closing you. Instead of, "I was such an idiot," say, "I see where I lost awareness." Instead of, "Why do I always do this?" Ask what triggered that response today. That shift in tone rewires the entire review process. It allows you to examine your day without shrinking from it. Aristotle believed that excellence is not an act, but a habit. But habits aren't built in guilt. They're built in awareness. And awareness is something you can grow every night if you let go of the belief that you have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't. You just have to be honest. And honesty thrives in a space that's safe, not self-critical. Let your nightly reflection become a ritual of strength. Let it be the time you meet yourself as a student of your own behavior, not the prosecutor of your flaws. Because when you do that, something powerful happens. Your past stops defining you, your mistakes stop haunting you, and your mind becomes a place you trust. Again, the goal isn't to ignore what went wrong, it's to approach it with curiosity instead of shame. To ask, what did this moment teach me, rather than, how could I be so stupid? One creates wisdom, the other creates wounds, and maybe that's what we've forgotten in our rush to be better. That growth isn't about being hard on ourselves, it's about being honest enough to see where we need to shift, and kind enough to believe we can. So, as you lie in bed tonight, review your day like a philosopher, not a critic. See your missteps as signals, not as signs of failure. You don't need to be flawless, you need to be aware, because awareness changes behavior, and behavior, repeated, becomes identity. That's how you become someone new, not through guilt, but through conscious self-respect. This is the essence of Stoicism. Not coldness, not perfection, but the courage to face yourself each night and say, here's where I can do better, and I will. Without drama, without shame, just truth and the will to rise again tomorrow. Detachment is often misunderstood. People hear the word and think of distance, coldness, indifference, as if to be detached means to stop caring. But in truth, detachment isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of power. Real detachment is when you feel deeply, but your emotions no longer own you. The things you see are clear to you, but they no longer control you. You don't give up, you just rise above. This difference has always been taught by Stoicism. You have power over your mind, not over outside events, wrote Marcus Aurelius. Know this, and you will be strong. To be detached is to be strong. It's not repression, it's taking back control. To stay steady, you don't need things to go your way. When people get it wrong, you don't fall apart. You do not look for approval. You don't beg for sure things. You let the world come as it is and decide how to act in it. You don't have to turn away from life to be this disciplined. When you understand it, you get it. The Stoics didn't avoid life's lessons. They just wouldn't let experience shake their inner base. They felt everything, but they didn't lose their sense of reason. That's what kept them from moving. It wasn't that they tried to hide their feelings, it was that they knew feelings didn't have the last word. At this point in time, reacting emotionally is praised. Where talking about your pain out loud is seen as a way to get better. Where being attached is seen as love, and being detached as weakness. But think about it. What's stronger? Being consumed by everything that happens to you, or being able to keep your cool through it all? Plato said that beating yourself is the first and biggest win. Loss of attachment is that win. That doesn't mean you don't feel hurt. That is, deception no longer shapes how you see yourself. But that doesn't mean you never feel let down. It means that being let down doesn't change your path. Being detached does not make you less human. It helps you stay steady. Think about what you do when things go wrong. Do you blame, get angry, or panic right away? Or can you stop, look around, and react with clarity instead of chaos? That pause is a mental break. That breath in the middle of an urge and a deed. That's where your officer lives. Even so, detachment is not an inactive state. It's not just disinterest dressed up. It needs a lot of care. It's important to be able to see your feelings without getting caught up in them. You need to be able to feel your feelings without giving up. You have to watch how people act without taking it personally right away. That's not being weak. Now that's skill. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." We can make the unconscious aware by separating from it. That's how we stop responding from past hurts and start making choices based on what we know. Life pulls us in this way, but this helps us walk through it on purpose. This is easiest for the mind to learn when everything else is quiet. You can learn detachment the most at night, when your body slows down and outside distractions fade. Not by ignoring your thoughts, but by looking at them without getting caught up in them. Not by putting your feelings down, but by seeing them as waves that go by instead of facts that trap you. That's why sleep is so strong. Not only does it rest the body, but it also shows what's on the mind. And if you practice detachment before bed, your mind will learn to stop holding on, practicing fights, and fixing problems that don't need to be solved. You teach your body that sometimes being still is stronger than reacting to something. Aristotle said that we are what we do over and over again. So, if you teach yourself every night to look at your inner world without letting it take over, you will wake up every day feeling peaceful. You no longer need to act cool. You turn into it. Detachment doesn't mean acting like nothing is important. It means understanding that not everything needs your attention. Take a look at how much you weigh. Things like other people's demands, mistakes you've made in the past, fears about the future, and daily stress all put pressure on your nervous system like invisible bricks. Once you feel detached, you can put that weight down. While it's not impossible, carrying it around all the time doesn't make you stronger. It just wears you out. When you fully understand this, you will no longer argue with facts. You let go of things that hurt you. Don't go after people who left. You no longer need everything to be fair or everyone to understand. You understand that being in charge won't bring you peace. It's in being clear. You can see things more clearly when you are detached. Not at all. Being detached is not cold. In a world full of noise, it's the fire of moderation. It's what lets you be there without being pulled away, to really feel things and stay on center, to care without wanting, to love without giving up who you are. Since hardening isn't the real goal, it means to become so connected to yourself that nothing else can throw you off. That's how the Stoics saw it. You can train your mind to do that every night. Focus, not force. Not by trying to fight it, but by giving up. Apathy is not the same as refusal. It's a transfer from chaos to calm, and from being dependent on your emotions to being in charge of your own life. That's not being cold. That's strength. You've been told that closure is what brings peace, that until you get the apology, the explanation, the conversation that never happened, you'll be stuck. But what if that belief is the very thing keeping you trapped? What if waiting for closure is just another way the mind delays healing? The truth is, closure is rarely something someone else can give you. More often, it's something you decide. You don't need someone to validate your pain in order to release it. You don't need all the answers before you can sleep in peace. Because sometimes the answer is silence, and learning to rest in silence. That's real strength. We think that closure means getting the story to make sense, but not everything will. Some people leave mid-sentence. Some situations end without justice. Some truths remain hidden, and some wounds never get the explanation they deserved. But life doesn't pause until we get closure. The mind, however, will try to. It will loop the memories, replay the moment, revisit the words over and over like a broken record, as if running the scene again will rewrite the ending. But all it does is keep you anchored to the pain. Carl Jung once wrote, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." That applies here. The more you demand closure from others, the more power you give to something outside yourself. And ironically, that very powerlessness is what steals your sleep. Because how do you rest when your peace depends on someone else doing what they've already proven they won't do? Real closure doesn't come when they finally explain themselves. It comes when you stop needing them to. It comes when you realize that understanding why someone hurt you doesn't always make it hurt less, that even if you got the apology, it wouldn't rewind the pain. That healing isn't a perfect puzzle where everything gets resolved. It's a choice to stop bleeding into your future from a wound that can no longer be changed. Socrates said, "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." That includes a mentally busy life, one where your mind never rests because it's chasing something it doesn't need. Closure becomes a phantom. You reach for it, but it's never quite there. And yet, if you pause, if you stop running the mental scripts, you'll realize something powerful. You already have everything you need to put it down. When you're lying awake thinking about what they should have said or what you should have done differently, ask yourself, what do I really want from this thought? Most of the time, it's reassurance. Reassurance that you were enough, that you were right, that what happened to you wasn't fair. But you don't need a replay to know your worth, and you don't need fairness to choose rest. Rest doesn't come from fixing the past. It comes from no longer needing to. It comes from seeing your pain and not trying to edit it, from facing the gap and not needing to fill it, from accepting that you may never fully understand why. But that understanding was never the requirement for moving forward. Aristotle believed that excellence is a habit, not a single act. And one of the greatest habits you can build is the habit of emotional closure internally. That means making peace with unfinished stories, with unanswered questions, with people who don't know how to love you, right? It means saying to yourself, I see it, I accept it, and I won't carry it any further. You can train your mind to do this every night. You can give yourself closure by ending the mental argument, by breathing through the urge to rewind, by choosing stillness over resolution. Because often it's the clinging that keeps the wound open, not the event itself. The Stoics never waited for closure. They waited for nothing. Epictetus taught, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control, and closure, when demanded from others, lies squarely beyond your control. You don't need them to make it right. You only need to stop making it yours to fix. This doesn't mean you pretend it didn't happen or that it didn't affect you. It means you honor what it did, but you refuse to be defined by it. It means you stop tying your healing to someone else's awakening. You grieve, you feel, you learn, but then you release. Because at some point, it's not about the past. It's about your nervous system. Your mind can't recharge if it's carrying conflict every night into sleep, if it's holding its breath, waiting for resolution. Rest is a decision you choose to release, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Think about it. The people who wronged you, they're not losing sleep over it. The past isn't lying awake with you, but you are. You're the one reliving, rethinking, reattaching. Closure is what you give yourself when you finally decide to stop needing the pain to make sense. When you stop asking, why did this happen, and start asking, what can I choose now? That's where your power is. Not in the answer, but in the choice. You can choose to put down the thought. You can choose to rest, not because everything is resolved, but because you're done letting the unresolved run your life. That's what the mind learns when you stop feeding it unfinished business before bed. That's when it learns that freedom isn't found in clarity. It's found in release. And when you do this regularly, night after night, something shifts. Your brain begins to heal because it finally has room to your emotions begin to calm because they're no longer being stirred by what-ifs. You don't just sleep, you renew because you're no longer clinging to an ending that was never yours to write. Closure isn't found in the past, it's created in the present. It's not a gift, it's a boundary. It says, this ends here. Not because everything's perfect, but because I'm ready to be free. And that freedom, that's what lets you rest. We avoid it all day long. We distract ourselves with to-do lists. We numb it with screens. We hide from it in the illusion of control. But when the lights go out and the world quiets down, one truth still hums beneath the surface. You won't be here forever. And though most people fear that thought, the Stoics saw it differently. For them, it wasn't morbid. It was clarifying. It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." That's not a suggestion to live in fear. It's an invitation to live in focus. Because when you carry the weight of mortality with you, not as panic, but as perspective, you begin to shed everything that doesn't matter. And when you allow that awareness to guide you into sleep, something powerful happens. The mind stops chasing noise and starts organizing truth. Mortality is the ultimate anchor. It strips away false urgency and reveals what's actually urgent: peace, purpose, presence. And oddly enough, it's at night, when we're most vulnerable, that this realization creeps in the loudest. That's why so many people feel uneasy before bed. It's not just overthinking. It's the quiet arrival of mortality reminding us you're temporary. What are you doing with that? Now, most people fight this. They push it away with distractions, scrolling, talking, planning, worrying. But the Stoic mind does something else. It listens. It allows mortality to shape the evening, not sabotage it. And that shaping, it sharpens. Because when you truly understand that this might be your last night, and one day it will be, you begin to treat your inner world differently. You stop wasting energy on petty conflict. You stop giving your mind to bitterness, to unresolved drama, to imagined futures. Mortality makes the mind minimal. It trims the excess. You fall asleep, not with clutter, but with clarity. And in that clarity, you become stronger. You become clean. Because a mind that remembers it's mortal is a mind that values each moment of rest as sacred, not sloppy. Carl Jung once said, "A man who is unconscious of the laws of his own being is at the mercy of chance." But mortality makes you conscious. It brings urgency not to external things, but to your internal state. It doesn't rush your actions, it refines your attention. Suddenly, the things you were obsessing about feel lighter, not because they're solved, but because they're put in their place. Mortality puts everything in its place. That's why the hours before sleep are so important. They're not just a time to wind down. They're a time to recalibrate. They're the quiet arena where the truth of your life catches up to you. And instead of fearing that, you can welcome it. You can let that hum of impermanence silence the noise, because what matters comes forward, and what doesn't fades. Plato believed that philosophy was a preparation for death, not in the sense of morbidity, but mastery. He saw contemplation of mortality as the path to higher living. And what is sleep if not a nightly rehearsal of letting go? Each time we close our eyes, we're practicing surrender. And that surrender becomes meaningful when it's tied to purpose, when it's done with awareness, when we fall asleep, not trying to escape life, but aligning ourselves with its truth. This is why rituals matter, not for superstition, but for attention. When you set aside a few minutes before bed to reflect, to breathe, to check in with what actually matters, you're not just relaxing, you're sharpening. You're turning the mind from reactive to reflective. You're becoming the kind of person who doesn't waste time chasing what doesn't feed the soul. And if you've ever laid awake feeling haunted by a strange sense of urgency, like you should be doing more, becoming more, understand this. That's not anxiety. That's the part of you waking up to life. The discomfort isn't a problem, it's a pointer. It means your mind knows there's more that you don't have forever. And that realization, when respected, can become a compass, not a burden. Seneca once wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Postpone nothing. Not peace, not presence, not inner work." The day you stop postponing is the day you start living. And that kind of mindset, when practiced nightly, shapes everything. It makes you more compassionate, more focused, less reactive, because you're no longer fooled into thinking you have unlimited chances. And here's the paradox. When you carry mortality into sleep, you don't become heavy, you become light, because you stop carrying things that don't matter. You stop mentally packing for a future you may never meet. You stop wasting your last conscious moments of the day on fear, resentment, or regret. Instead, you rest with your soul intact. The Stoics never said, "Don't feel." They said, "Feel with purpose." They said, "Choose the thoughts you fall asleep with, like you choose the final words of your day, because those words echo. They seep into the subconscious. They become your morning mindset. And the mind that remembers death each night doesn't panic, it prioritizes. So let this thought walk with you into sleep. If this were your last night, would these thoughts deserve to be your last ones? If the answer is no, change the script. You can right now. You can shift from noise to stillness, from grasping to grace, from fear to freedom. Because the greatest clarity doesn't come from overthinking. It comes from remembering what actually matters. When you allow mortality to sit quietly beside you at night, not as a threat, but as a teacher, you begin to sleep like a philosopher. You close your eyes not to forget life, but to absorb it more fully. You don't just rest, you reset. You don't just recover, you return to the core of what matters. And that's how a Stoic sleeps, not with denial, not with distraction, but with the humble power of someone who knows the clock is ticking and is grateful enough to make peace with the silence. There's a big difference between collapsing into sleep and surrendering to it with strength. Most people end the day by shutting down, not learning, not reflecting, just escaping. But if you let the day end, you without pausing to extract anything from it, no insight, no growth, no gratitude, it means you survived but didn't evolve. You made it through, but you didn't rise through it. And over time, that quiet pattern of emotional neglect becomes something deeper. A life lived passively rather than powerfully. Stoicism wasn't designed for perfect people. It was built for real people, flawed, struggling, uncertain. And that's why it's so transformative, because it doesn't demand that your days go smoothly. It only asks that you respond to them with awareness. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that reaction, that response, begins not in the moment of conflict, but in the moment after, when the dust settles and you're left with your thoughts. That's when the real shaping begins. We're taught to end the day by turning off. Turn off your phone, your brain, your emotions. But the Stoic path doesn't end in silence. It ends in sense-making, in synthesis, in taking what happened today and asking yourself, what part of this day will I carry into tomorrow? And what part will I leave here? That single act of reflection done consistently is what separates reactive minds from refined ones. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think reflection means overthinking, replaying arguments, rehearsing regrets. That's not reflection. That's rumination. And the difference is critical. Reflection seeks clarity. Rumination seeks control. One frees you, the other traps you. And you can feel the difference. When you reflect properly, your breath slows, your emotions soften. You're not clinging, you're cleansing. Let the day teach you, not with a lecture, but with a whisper. What drained you today? What lifted you? Who did you become even slightly because of what you faced? Most people never ask these questions. They're too tired. But the truth is, they're tired because they don't ask. Because they carry every unresolved moment with them into the night, and the mind is heavy when nothing's sorted. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." That's not an insult. It's a challenge, a wake-up call. Because if you don't examine your life, you don't own it. You don't know what's helping you, what's hurting you, what's shaping you. You're not living, you're reacting. You're not learning, you're looping. That's why night is sacred, because it gives you the one thing the day rarely does. Space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to process without performing. And in that space there's power, not the loud, flashy kind, the quiet, enduring kind, the kind that grows every time you choose awareness over avoidance. Even if today was hard, even if it broke you a little, it doesn't mean it was wasted. Pain doesn't make a day worthless. But ignoring the lesson inside that pain, that's the real loss. And you don't need a journal or a ritual to get the benefit. Just a moment, a willingness to listen, to ask. Not why did this happen to me, but what did this reveal in me? And if the answer is something you don't like, good. Now you know. Now you have something to work with, because the point isn't to be perfect, it's to be present. That's what Stoicism is about. Not suppressing emotion, but transforming it. Not avoiding the hard parts of life, but extracting strength from them. And that work, real quiet internal work, starts when the noise of the world dies down. At the end of the day, you're left with yourself. And that moment when you're brushing your teeth, lying in bed, staring into the dark, that's not just routine. It's reflection time. It's where your mind decides what story it will carry forward. And if you skip that moment, if you shut down instead of tuning in, you miss the whole point. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." But what do you repeatedly think before bed? What story do you repeatedly tell yourself? Are you feeding your mind old guilt, petty frustrations, unresolved fears, or are you teaching it to grow, to see patterns, to recognize emotional loops, to practice letting go? Let the day teach you, even if all it taught you is what not to repeat. Even if all it showed you is that you're still healing. Even if the only win you had was that you made it through, that's enough. Because growth doesn't always look like confidence. Sometimes it looks like honesty, like admitting you snapped when you didn't mean to, like noticing your envy, like catching yourself in self-pity and choosing not to stay there. That's growth. Quiet, stoic, lasting growth. So tonight, don't let the day end you. Don't collapse under its weight. Sit with it. Look it in the eye. Let it speak to you. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be willing to listen to what your life is trying to teach you, because in that willingness you become something rare. A person who doesn't just live through days, but learns from them. A person who walks through life not with arrogance, but with awareness. And that in the end is the mark of true strength. Most people wake up reacting, not thinking, not choosing, just responding, like a machine programmed by yesterday's noise. The alarm goes off and their mind is already racing what they forgot, what they're behind on, what someone said or didn't say. Their feet hit the floor, but their thoughts never got a chance to align, and that's why they feel drained before the day even begins. It's not the morning that's broken, it's the programming. But when you wake up with a trained mind, everything changes. You're no longer pulled by impulses, emotions, or other people's energy. You move with clarity, with intention, not perfectly, but consciously. That's a superpower in today's world. Not because it's flashy, but because it's rare. And like all rare things, it's powerful, not because it's loud, but because it's consistent. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, not to be busy, not to be validated, to be alive." That awareness alone is enough to change how you carry yourself. Because when you're truly aware of life, of your breath, your mind, your choices, you stop throwing your mornings away on autopilot. And here's where the night plays its part. A trained mind in the morning is born from what you feed it at night. Sleep doesn't erase your thoughts, it incubates them. It takes whatever mental pattern you fall asleep with and strengthens it. That's not spirituality, it's neuroscience. The subconscious brain reviews the day, encodes memory, and reinforces thought loops during rest. So if you fall asleep with worry, resentment, distraction, that's what gets rehearsed. And you'll wake up heavy, even if your body got 8 hours. But if you train the mind to settle into sleep with clarity, calm, even a hint of purpose, your subconscious gets to work shaping a foundation you'll actually want to build on. You wake up with less noise, less emotional fog, more grip, more presence, and that's a different kind of energy. Not the kind that burns hot and fast, the kind that carries you forward with steady control. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But when you train the unconscious, when you influence it through repetition, intention, awareness, it no longer directs your life blindly. You lead it, and that's the beginning of mental freedom. There's no need for morning hacks if your mind is already grounded before sunrise. No need to jolt yourself awake with loud motivation if you've gone to sleep in alignment. A trained mind doesn't need to be forced. It flows. It's not about getting rid of hard thoughts. It's about deciding which ones deserve your attention. Because when you wake up with a trained mind, you're not just alert, you're aware. You notice your first emotion before it takes over. You hear the thought before it spirals. And in that tiny space between stimulus and response, you gain power. It's a calm kind of power, one that doesn't flinch under pressure, one that doesn't chase validation, one that doesn't fear being misunderstood. A power that comes from self-command, from knowing that your inner world sets the tone for everything else. The weather, the inbox, the news, they may still come. But your reactions, those belong to you because your mind was already trained before the world had a chance to pull you off track. This is what the modern world forgets. That discipline doesn't begin with action, it begins with thought. And not just daytime thoughts, nighttime ones too. The subtle affirmations, the quiet decisions to forgive, the unseen shift from anger to awareness. These shape your inner rhythm, and your rhythm shapes your life. So yes, waking up with a trained mind is a superpower, not because it makes life easy, but because it makes you unshakable. You don't need a perfect routine. You need a prepared mind, one that was shaped not by panic, but by peace, one that doesn't chase the world, but leads itself through it. And that kind of mind, one that is still sharp and self-led, becomes your greatest tool, your anchor, your edge. Because when the world moves fast, the one who's steady wins. When everyone is loud, the one who's centered is heard. And when everything feels chaotic, the one who's trained rises not with force, but with clarity. That's not magic. That's not luck. That's mental preparation. And it's built in the quiet moments, especially the ones before sleep. So that when the morning comes, you don't just wake up, you rise and you move, not with panic, but with power. The day doesn't decide who you are. You do. And it begins in the quiet, when no one's watching. When the world is still, that's where strength is built. That's where peace is planted. And that's where your real power begins. So tonight, give your mind something noble to rest on. Let it carry wisdom into your sleep, and you'll wake with a mind that's not only clear, but unconquered. If you found peace in this, you'll want to watch the next video waiting on your screen. It was made to go even deeper. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. Come back when you need to return to yourself.